Hello, everybody, and welcome. There's a bit of time to start. I do apologize. It's sort of 15 minutes will be in there, but I sort of wanted to get all set up and all ready because usually I screw something up somewhere. I'm just checking that all of my stuff is on. Yeah, cool. Yeah, kinda. I do have to do my PowerPoint setup, so let me do that. And yeah, I got up this morning feeling good, feeling good. I hope you're good. I hope you're good. I hope you're feeling very very relaxed. And this should be a good debate. I know that um objective morality objective ethics, what am I talking about? Objective ethics is kind of, I mean, he's fine, he's absolutely fine. He's another atheist, so I know that he's not, you know, one of the sort of douchebag debate bros coming over, so it's totally fine. Yeah, I don't use OBS all that much. I gotta be honest, Al. I should figure out how to use Stream Elements. I haven't. Just 1 second, and I might. Let me see. That should be the same one, right? That one? Is that the one? Yeah, that's it. Okay, fantastic. All right, cool. And I just want to double check. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, okay. All right, I'm good. I'm good. The world is fucked. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. Oh dear. Oh dear. No, that's not working. I might have to. I think I had this problem last time. So give me 1 second. I am here. I am here. I just have to set this up in a way that'll work. Oh, that did work. I wonder why. Is it that if I minimize it, it goes away? Oh, if I minimize it, it goes away. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, I did not know that. All right, well, we learn something new every day, don't we? Or, I mean, we should, but we don't. Totally fine, totally fine. I should have that up on screen anyway, so I should be fine like that and like this. Yeah, speaking of which, actually, I will be right back. I just got to grab my water and my stuff, so I will be right back. Okay, sorry about that, people. I need my water. I got my water. I need look brand spanking new notepads, people. Brand spanking new. I know people take notes on computer. I don't know why. I like notepads. I know paper and stuff. It's terrible, but I like to draw arrows between stuff and things like that. Circling things. Now, I know you can do that on computer, but I don't know. I find it too difficult to do really quickly, so I prefer my notepads. Ah, that new notepad smell. Yeah, so we're good. We got a brand spanking new notepad. We're going to bust it out on objective ethics and see how we do. Hey, peeps. You know what? I really need the water. I really need the water because seriously, it is hotter than a desert steak snatch over here. I tell you what, it is frigging hot. I worry about usually February is the hotter month around here, so I dread to think. I dread to think what it's going to be like. Okay. Let's see. I think I'm going. You use paper? Ah, good one. Good, Al. That's fine. That's fine. I'd like to know how this is a debate. Morality cannot be objective unless it's imposed subjectively. There could be a debate about which subjective morality meets an object. Well, that's not really what objective means, Al. The question is like, so really you've got to point to some kind of objective sort of moral fact in the world that's independent of any mind. Basically, it just means mind independent. That's the easiest way to look at it. I don't think there is objective moral facts. Other people disagree, but that's the whole. Hotter than what again? Hotter than what? It's hotter than a desert snake's snatch, is what I said. It's colder than a tauntaun snatch up in here. that's yeah. Drive in. What the hell is a whiteout? I don't know what a whiteout is. Is this a snow term that people like me are unfamiliar with? Is that what we're doing here? It's some kind of esoteric thing. I better get into the thing. What's it actually? I better get into it. And where's my link? A few minutes early. Yeah. All right. There it is. So I might go a bit dark. Just letting you know, I might go a bit dark while I am sort of setting up and talking with Sarah, the host. But I will be with you. Hold that paper in front of your face and drive. Dang. Well, Al, you don't have to have a moral lawgiver. It just has to be independent of your, like any human mind. So, like for instance, I'll explain it as we go along, but you'll get the idea. I'm, I'm. It's not a hill I would die on. I'm not like, oh well, it can't be objective, and I'm going to die on that hill. But at the same time, I don't believe that objective moral facts exist. So that's fine. That's fine. Okay, I'll be right with you.
Generally, you said feminism is neutral.
Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
Money. I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
Stop.
The deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
To lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main tenet of politics, right? This is my ideology.
Yeah, but...
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool, Robert. Oh, that? With a crowbar, you said?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, here bringing to you a live debate. Can't even talk now. It's been a while since we've had one, but we're here ready to go, followed by another one tomorrow evening. Tonight, I have with me the famous Mark Reid, who has been here before. He's debated very well on this topic, especially back in returning for morality. I cannot talk. Morality once more. And then followed by Objective Ethics, the challenger here tonight, ready to dive in on his first time on the Raging Tomato. Mark, if you'd like to kick off with your opening statement, please.
Sure. I do have, if I could share my screen, I do have presentation that I usually do. Give me one sec. That should be it. Just let me know if you're seeing blackness or anything at all. I prefer the term micro celebrity, I guess. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, yeah, that'll do. That's beautiful. Okay, fantastic. I'll just grab my thing here. All right. So, firstly, I want to say thank you to Objective Ethics for being my opposition, Sarah at the Raging Tomato, and thank you for your time. Today, we're going to be comparing objective and subjective morality, and there's a bit I want to go through, but before I get started, maybe just smack the like button, support the channel, encourage debates like this in the future. I know some people really dislike philosophical subjects, so I'll try to keep this presentation easy, simple, to understand, so it's not too complex. Firstly, I do have to go through a couple of definitions so we know exactly what we're talking about. So morality is basically the subject of the debate, and when we're talking morality, we're talking about oughts. Whenever we're saying we should take one action over another, we're making a moral distinction, although the reasons why we ought to take an action can be varied. These on the screen are the definitions of morality from Stanford Encyclopedia. We will be talking mostly about the second one, which is a normative view on morality as it is concerned whether the code of conduct would be agreed upon by people across cultures, nations, civilizations, is made up of subjective opinions of the people who make up that society, or whether morality is made up of moral facts that are drawn from some other source than the minds of the people. Now, I do want to mention that I'm using morals and ethics interchangeably. However, I have no real problem with ethicists making a distinction between morals being defined as individual perspectives, while ethics being an overarching group structure that establishes a normative code. I've got no problem with differentiating the two, although for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be using them more or less interchangeably. So this is my description of subjective versus objective, essentially it can be boiled down to whether the position is independent of any mind, like the position of a rock, or the distance to the sun, or whether it's the result of a mind, like whether the rock is heavy or the sun is bright. Do keep in mind that something must be stance independent to be objective, even if that stance is based on or influenced by objective things. For instance, you may think that ice cream is delicious, right? And it may be that, hey, you have a physiological reaction to sugar, which makes you believe that. But it is still based upon your subjective experience. So it still is subjective, even though it may be based upon objective things. So basically my position is that in order for morality to be objective, there must be objective moral facts. These are moral positions that are not based upon any subjective opinion, belief, or cultural attitude. Where these moral facts come from or where they originate isn't really important. The important part is to demonstrate they actually exist without laying their origin at the human mind, whether that's emotive, cognitive, or abstract, or the imagination, basically. So these are a few arguments for subjective morality. I do want to present them so that we have some kind of argument on my side for the subjectiveness of morality. First off, we've got moral diversity. Now, when I've said here that there's some general precepts that are ubiquitous, and what that means is that they exist generally, are prevalent across sort of a group, but not universal. There are exceptions. So we have a number of moral values, like, for instance, do not kill. That generally holds true, or almost always hold true, but there are cases like the Aztec culture that practice mass sacrifice, Chinese Empire, where the emperor could and often did execute subjects on a whim. In fact, there's a lot more of these violent cultures than not. However, these cultures usually had moral proscriptions, or things they shouldn't do, or obligations based upon societal structure or group dynamics. For instance, a tribe may condemn killing another tribesperson. However, they have no problem brutalizing the neighboring tribe, even though the two tribes may share a common lineage. This suggests that an in-group, out-group moral dynamics are more a case of subjective bias than it is any moral fact. For example, Tribe A conquers Tribe B and subjugates them. In the ancient world, all perfectly moral. Over time, the culture assimilates and Tribe A and B become one nation, where it is then immoral to kill anyone in the nation from Tribe A or Tribe B. Where did the moral fact change? And how did it change? Is it simply they assimilated? That seems to be more of a subjective bias than a moral fact. Now, this one's a bit complex, so I'll try to break it down into simple term. Hume basically pointed out there's a lurking or a hidden ought in any given statement of moral fact. This is the is-ought gap. So if there is a metaphysical or physical fact that exists, you cannot jump from one to a moral without a reason why. For instance, you can say that humans evolved to be cooperative, so humans ought to be cooperative. The fact that humans did evolve to be cooperative, but we can be complete douchebags, there's a lurking ought in there, which says humans ought to act in accordance with evolution, that simply having the capacity to do otherwise presents another moral choice that is often skipped by naturalistic moral realists based in the desires of the subject. It may be that evolution allows organisms to survive, and we want to survive. However, that want is a desire that is based in the mind. Even if a survival instinct comes naturally to humans, we can always choose to break that instinct. And speaking of nature, this is the naturalistic fallacy. Now, it's tied very closely to Hume's guillotine. An assumption is made that natural things are good and non-natural things are bad. This does not follow, as some things that are natural are not what we would call good, and some things that are artificial are actually not bad. For instance, and here's a really good example, cyanide is a natural substance. Aspirin is a synthetic, a non-natural substance. You would find it hard-pressed for someone to say, hey, Cyanide is good because it's natural, and aspirin is bad because it's non-natural or artificial. So that's basically the naturalistic fallacy. And this is something that I've put out there, and it's the first time I've sort of presented this. This is saving the cat, and it's sort of an answer to naturalistic moral realism, or that morality is objective because of evolutionary process. And it's saving a pet is sort of seen in our society as a really good thing to do. It's in screenwriting used to endear one to a protagonist. It basically will show that they're a good person, and it sort of is ubiquitous across the culture. Although not everybody, if somebody really hates cats, they may not agree. The question is, if morality is based upon simple evolution or naturalistic moral realism, why save a cat? It may endanger humans. It may be a waste of resources as far as humans is concerned, but is still seen as a good act. And I put it to you that this act is good because people like cats. I think it's a good act because I like cats. But that is an example of subjective morality. And that's a question I do want to pose. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. And if I have any time, I will concede the rest of that time.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Objective ethics. I wanted to ask first, did you have a PowerPoint, or are you just rolling off of? It doesn't, you don't have to.
Winging it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep. No, you don't have to. Most people don't. All right. And I'll leave it to you. The floor is yours.
I'd like to thank Sarah for hosting. I'd like to thank Mark for reaching out to me and offering me this debate. I have a lot of respect for him. He's very intelligent, very strong debater, and I'm very flattered that he would consider me to be a worthy opponent. So basically, I'm going to start with, there's 3 different ways to approach this argument. You could do the natural way, the natural argument through evolution. So you could say the causal link that leads from morality to human flourishing is simplified by the statement that morals are universal propositions, which are a necessary precondition of cooperation. This is a natural process that leads to human flourishing, which is guided by the natural laws of evolution. All natural laws must follow the laws of logic and are necessarily true and stance independent. They're objective. To run it through the argument of reason, as a human being, I am a moral agent. Agency means I set goals and take actions. In order to achieve my goals, I need my freedom and well-being. If I need my freedom and well-being, then I have a right to my freedom and well-being. This is to say that I have a reason to have my freedom and well-being. If I have a right to have my freedom and well-being because I'm a moral agent, then all moral agents have an equal right to their freedom and well-being. Therefore, all human beings have a reason to have their freedom and well-being. If all human beings have a reason to have their freedom and well-being, then they ought to have it. Thus, all moral agents ought not interfere with others' freedom and well-being. Moral actions are actions by moral agents that affect others' freedom and well-being. All human beings ought to act morally. If all human beings ought to act morally, then morality is universal. If morals are universal, then they cannot be stance-dependent and must apply to all possible universes with moral agents. Therefore, morality is objective. You could run it through the logical argument, the laws of logic, the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle. This is how we function in the world around us. If subjective morality can lead to a logical contradiction, then one or both moral claims must be false. If a moral claim is objectively true, then it must be universally true, follow the laws of logic, and be stance independent. Subjective morality leads to logical contradictions. Therefore, morality must be objective. An example for premise number 3, how does subjective morality lead to a logical contradictions? This can be used in any moral situation. We'll use slavery as a very common one. The slave owner values his own freedom and well-being. Therefore, is a logical contradiction to say he is morally justified in taking away the same freedom and well-being, which he values himself, away from another person. He can do it, but he cannot justify it epistemically using his own standard of values. So the contradiction is within his own internal system of values. Freedom and well-being must either be valuable or not valuable. From the subjective position, the Frege-Geach problem, sometimes called the embedding problem, is a significant challenge to the subjective view. The embedding problem argues that the subjective moral view does not fit with certain ways we use moral judgments, particularly moral reasoning and the embedding of moral judgments in conditional statements. Expressions of emotion don't combine in the same structured, truth-preserving way that truth-apt propositions do. The following conditional statement only makes sense if the antecedent "stealing is wrong" is capable of being true or false. Stealing is wrong. If stealing is wrong, then getting your little brother to steal is wrong. Therefore, getting your little brother to steal is wrong. And this is a perfectly valid argument. The conclusion follows logically from the premises. Richard Carrier, in his recent 2025, peer-reviewed paper published in Religions MDPI, presents a rigorous and provocative ontological argument that objective moral facts not only exist, but must exist in all possible universes containing rational agents. The fact that moral judgments make sense in conditional statements and logical arguments suggests they are truth apt. For example, that objective moral realism is correct and subjective moral relativism, moral anti-realism, or emotivism is false. Subjective morality holds a high burden of proof. The subjective moral relativist must logically bridge the gap between two objectively true statements, that if a person is murdered, their loved ones will feel sorrow and loss, and also why do strangers have a logical, practical, and justified aversion to this murder. Also, murder is illegal in every country in the world because studies have consistently shown that the belief that murder is wrong is universal. The subjective moral view offers no explanation of how boo murder as a subjective position can bridge these objective universal facts about murder. In short, if subjective morality is correct, it becomes extremely hard to explain how moral judgments can appear in conditional statements, how moral judgments can appear in logical arguments, how such arguments can be valid, or how moral reasoning works at all. And I think to make it within the time, I cut this down quite a bit, and I've got quite a bit left. I don't think I want to run through any more of this. We'll get into it. I do agree with Mark's position. I think for the most part, morality, basically a set of principles or values that determine what moral agents ought to do, how we behave, essentially, are normative statements. Subjective, stance dependent, personal opinion. Objective would be stance independent. And I think I'll go ahead and concede the rest of my time there.
Perfect. No issue there. Thank you so kindly. All right. And as a kind reminder to the audience, we are going to get through our debate. Then we will move into reading your kind super chats and any questions or comments you may have at the end. And then, of course, we will move into the open panel portion where if you'd like to come up and discuss the topic yourself, we will drop the link and have you up here. All right. And gentlemen, I believe we wanted to go into cross-examination. So I'm going to give Objective Ethics the opportunity to cross-examine Mark first. And I'll go ahead and set the timer now. OE to you.
Mark, would you agree that we use logic and reason to understand the objective truths about the world that we live in?
Yes.
And do you think that freedom and well-being are rights that all humans ought to have?
I believe so, yes.
And is there an inherent value that you're basing that on as far as being a human or humanness?
There's value to me.
And where do you get that? Where do you ground that value in? How do you see, what's the ontology of that value?
Well, I mean, it's based upon my own desires. So if I want to be free and live in a prosperous, happy world, then there's certain things I ought to do to make sure that occurs.
So would you say that decisions have predictable and repeatable consequences?
Sure.
If our actions have predictable, testable, and repeatable consequences, would that give us an objective standard for these actions?
No. Because your meta ethics are still not objective. The question is, where does it come from that the world has to be prosperous, happy? So I'm not asking questions, but what occurs to me is there's nothing objective to say that the world has to be prosperous and happy and people enjoying themselves. I don't find anything objective about that. What it is that I want to be objective, and then we can sort of say, hey, there are consequences to me going around and slaughtering people, say, that will make the world very despondent, dystopian, and not prosperous at all. So I would avoid those consequences and say, hey, if it is that I want a world that's happy and prosperous, there are things that I ought to do. And one of those things is to give people equal rights and, freedoms under a system.
So I'm trying to track everything here. So if we say that if I want X outcome,
Mhm.
then I need to follow steps 1, 2, and 3, and this will lead to this particular outcome. I can predict this. So the grounding of this outcome is going to be in the predictable steps. So those predictable steps, would they be then objective because they're not based on our opinions, they're simply descriptions of what these steps lead to consequentially?
Well, the actions will lead to objective in virtue of a subjective meta-ethical goal, so what you're trying to achieve. But because that meta-ethical goal is subjective, it automatically makes what you ought to do subjective. Because if I want there to be a miserable world, the what I ought to do will change upon what I want, and that want comes from that cannot be objective, in my opinion.
Would you grant that every human being wants to live a good life inherently?
Well, inherently, not really. I wouldn't say everyone does.
So you think that it's possible that there are people who actually intentionally want to live a bad life, or do you think it's possible everybody wants to live a good life and they're just confused as to what a good life might be?
What do you mean by good? Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. I'm not trying to jump on the questions. When you say a good life, to me, you're automatically putting morals into the system, because you're sort of saying they want to live a good life. Well, what is good? Is being happy and fulfilled automatically good? Or is being powerful and rich and all of these things automatic? Like, what we've got a problem with what's good straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think that a good life basically is being happy and fulfilled. And I think that there are definitely things that we could look at, like having money, enough resources, and things of this nature that are superficial that can help, bleed into this good feeling, a good life. But we also need to have things like self-respect. For example, I think that if anybody lacks self-respect, that they are lacking something. If you're lacking anything, you cannot live a good life. So a good life is to be fulfilled, would be how I would define a good life. And I think that everybody is ultimately looking for this fulfillment just naturally. It's a common goal that we all share.
Well, I would agree that, hey, I would like to live a fulfilling life. I know that is, again, I'll sort of use the term ubiquitous, which means that it is generally the case everywhere. But I don't think it's universal, having met, over the course of my life, a large wedge of human society. I don't think that is universal. I think it's pretty well spread out. I think it's pretty well sort of, a commonality, but I don't think it's universal to all humans, no.
I think that maybe because it seems to be based on my own personal, and again, this is anecdotal, but I have had a lot of conversations recently with like antinatalists, for example, people who think it's immoral to bring babies into the world because there's so much suffering, for example, and stuff. So I've heard people make a lot of claims against this concept of that life even has the potential for goodness. However, it seems to me, and I want to be careful how I couch this, because I'm certainly not, and I want to be very clear about this, I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything harmful to themselves. It's very important. But I just want to make the statement that living is a choice we make, right? It's an active choice that we make. We aren't living by coincidence. We are born by coincidence. That's outside of any decision-making processes we have. But from a very young age, we decide to eat, to sleep, to clothe, to shelter ourselves, etc., not to drink poison for breakfast, so on and so forth. So we are actively deciding to live. If we didn't actively decide to live, it seems counterintuitive, almost self-defeating to say that we would actively try to live a bad life or a life that is not fulfilling. I'm having a hard time just conceptualizing this.
Well, okay, so I think that fulfilling to some people is a lot different than what is fulfilling to others. I think that we have not a vastly varied, there are commonalities between it, but when we're talking about morality, to me, that's a code of conduct governing what we ought to do. So if fulfilling to you is a set of parameters that is material, for instance, let's just say that, they may say, hey, that is fulfilling to me. And there is no way I can challenge what somebody says is fulfilling to them because that's all that I have. And I will grant you that it is ubiquitous, that it is a commonality that seems to arise again and again, that people have these things of, you know, family, friends, contacts, love, you know, self-improvement and self-actualization as commonalities, but that is not universal across all humans. And there's no real way I can test that when somebody says, hey, I'm fulfilled by material things. That's what does me. I don't know how you can test that.
Yeah, I think that's a good response. I think that looking at the sum of all the parts, if anybody is lacking something, I think a logical epistemic argument can be made for what is lacking, what determines it, what will lead to a good life. And I think we can make a logical conclusion. I think if we're lacking things, then we can assume that something is self-defeating into the definition of what we consider to be a fulfilling life by definition of fulfilling. And I think that if we lack things like, because we do have this unique ability to self-reflect, and that given that unique ability that humans apparently seem to have, as opposed to other animals, is our self-reflection, that self-respect is an important part of this fulfilled life. And to have self-respect, we would need to have the virtues of such as fairness, justice, things of this nature, to be able to justify our actions. And justified actions would definitely fit under the definition of moral actions. But maybe we're just seeing the fulfillment from a different angle. Because I agree with you that people can have a different view, a subjective view of what a fulfilled life is. Somebody might think getting drugs and alcohol is fulfilling them. But when it comes to actually justifying that claim, it seems to me to become self-defeating.
Is there a question in there?
I just tried to clarify onto what you're saying. I apologize.
Okay.
So let me follow up with this then. So if morality is completely subjective, what purely subjective standard gave, for example, the Allies the justification to combat the Axis Nazi regime if everything is just subjective? Well, how do we justify stopping tyranny?
It's more sort of what happens when people agree on what they want in the world. For instance, the Nazis having to use tons of propaganda, for instance, to convince and terror to convince their people that they're going to, you know, make life better for them, and simply not doing it. And we have accounts of, for instance, women that were taken prisoner during the war that sort of were told that the Allies would starve them and beat them and do all of these horrible things to them, because they didn't have that moral justification to say, hey, we're going to make your lives better and establish the Third Reich, because what they were doing wouldn't actually get to the goal that they were basically telling people that they were getting to. So when it comes to things like that, not only are the Germans against the morality of the Allies, they're in my opinion, they're against their own morality, because their actions will not in fact lead to the purported goals or the ostensible goals that they are convincing everybody of.
Perfect. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mark to be able to cross-examine objective ethics. I will go ahead and start the timer now for you, Mark.
So are you a naturalistic moral realist?
Yes.
Okay, so can I assume, or can I ask, is it evolution that you're basically resting these premises in?
Well, I actually think it could be observed in multiple different ways. We can look at it through evolution as well. I think that human flourishing, that morality leads to cooperation. It's a necessary precondition, which then leads to human flourishing. We see the human population growing every year. So I think we have empirical evidence that the more successful we are at cooperating, then the more successful we are in flourishing. And if we know that morality is decisions about what ought we do to basically get along, then one seems to lead to the other naturally.
But why ought we flourish? Like, why does morality automatically lead to flourishing?
Morality leads to flourishing because it enhances cooperation. And I think this is simply a law of nature, that cooperation is what benefits our species in particular, because we're a social species of animal.
Okay, so that's sort of an is, right? Like, so humans are a social species. Why ought we act according to the way that our species has evolved?
Because I think that we have a motivation to, or a reason to, because it makes our lives easier, makes our lives more fulfilled, more enjoyable. So there are consequences to immoral behavior that are predictable. So murder, for example, leads to fear and revenge. Theft leads to distrust. Slavery leads to revolt, so on and so forth. And so we find it to be a easier lifestyle when we work together, because that's how we've evolved to exist and to flourish, is by working together as a social species. So we have a motivation to do so. That's not say that we have to do this, but we have a clear motivation to do this. I think that when we act immorally, it's because we have a unjustified moral disposition that we tend to separate ourselves from the group, but we find that most successful when we work with the group. So, like Carl Sagan said, few working together can accomplish so much more than many can alone.
Sure, yeah, and you sort of had said, well, we've got the motivation to do so, and I wouldn't disagree with that. There's definitely motivation there. But what I'm more sort of pressing down on is that there are a lot of things in evolution, like aggression, for instance, and violence that humankind is sort of evolved to do as well. And I'm wondering why, sort of meta-ethically, like as in what your goal is, why it is objective to prioritize cooperation over violence when both of them are evolutionarily based in humans.
I do think that we can act in violence, for example, but I think that we find that when we act out in violence, it leads to specific consequences that ultimately become self-refuting to our end goal of living the most fulfilled life that we can. I think the best, easiest, most fulfilling life is when we're actually cooperating and working together. Coercion and force, as many philosophers who believe in objective moralism have pointed out, is actually the greatest moral, greatest crime, or the greatest negative, the greatest bad, so to speak, quote unquote bad or immoral thing. Like Ayn Rand, for example, would be an objectivist who believes that coercion and physical force, because what you do is you affect people's ability to reason, and we are reasoning animals. That's one of the things that separates us. So it seems to be counterintuitive to how we were designed to function. So we're basically working against the grain as opposed to going with the grain.
So it seems to me that, and is it that you see that you would rather use cooperation because that leads to a fulfilled life rather than violence, which leads to a fractured life? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes, and I do think that we all ultimately are. And I was trying to kind of hammer down on this earlier, and I don't think we really were able to get to it. But I do think that we all ultimately are trying to live this fulfilled life. I think it's incoherent. It seems to me, anyway, to be incoherent to think that we're not trying to live a fulfilled life. I've never seen or observed this. I've seen people do a lot of crazy things in an attempt to live a fulfilled life. Like I mentioned, drugs and alcohol, or people they steal money because they think they need this money, so they're going to take it from somebody else. But ultimately, they lack self-respect. They lack the integrity, the hard work ethic of getting their own resources through hard work. And so ultimately, their life is less fulfilled by engaging in these broken activities. So I think our goal is to find a way to live the most fulfilling life that we possibly can. And I do believe that just by observing the way that we work together being the most effective way to go through life, the easiest way is through cooperation, because of the way that we've evolved as a social species, that this most fulfilled life will be attained through cooperation. I think morality lays out a clear path of actions that we can predict the outcomes of, that will lead us to this fulfilled life.
Well, I'm not sort of questioning that. What would you call the opposite? I mean, I said fractured life earlier. What would you call the opposite to a fulfilled life?
An unfulfilled life.
Unfulfilled
or a
life.
life
Fantastic.
That's lacking.
Okay, or a life that's unfulfilled life. Sounds good. So would you agree that it is a choice to lead a fulfilled life or unfulfilled life?
It's a choice of how we go about doing it, but I don't think that it's something that we actually do choose. I think we all inherently want this. It's a common goal that all human beings are born with, this drive. It drives us as an organism in the same way that hunger drives us to eat. It's not like, I mean, we can choose what we want to eat and when we want to eat, but if we don't eat, we won't survive. So it's necessary for our survival to actually eat. It's something that drives us biologically. It's right. So the same thing with morality. If we want to ultimately meet our ultimate goal, which is this fulfilled life, that every human being wants to live this fulfilled life, the best way, most assured way to do that is to follow this particular pathway, this moral structure that we can attain when we look at like the virtues, for example, that we can justify all of our actions, that we are fair, that we have wisdom, so we understand how to apply knowledge properly. All of these things play a part in attaining this fulfilled life, that we would lack nothing. An unfulfilled life would then be a life that lacks something or many things.
Okay, well, I mean, you brought up hunger earlier. If we don't eat, we don't. But people do survive without a fulfilled life. So what actually makes this objective? You sort of said, well, it's part of our survival. But I do note that people survive having unfulfilled lives. So why does that make it objective?
The goal itself is objective. It's not to say they can't, but they're not meeting their goal. The goal is objective because we're born with this goal to live this fulfilled life. I
Is
don't
it
think that we're born with the goal that we want to live an unfulfilled life. I think every human being does want to live a fulfilled life. I think the opposite just seems incoherent to me, that I want to live an unfulfilled life. The statement, the mere statement itself seems self-defeating.
But you're talking about wants. Why isn't that why want subjective as being a desire to do something?
It's a desire that we all share, that we're all born with. It's an inherent desire. In the same way, like I said, with hunger is an inherent desire that we all will. Hunger is an objective desire because it's our biology. Organic organisms need to take in organic matter to turn into chemical energy, right? To survive, we have to process food and turn that into energy to continue to survive. So all organisms are evolved this way. Same thing with this good life. We all evolved as a human being, as our species. We have evolved to want to live this good life, and that's because we have evolved with the ability for self-reflection. So we are able to look inside, and we're able to look abstractly at things, and we're able to look at our lives, and there's a value judgment that we can see. Every single human being has this same value judgment of wanting to live this good life, this fulfilled life.
Would you agree that there's some people that don't live a life that meet your criteria of a fulfilled life, but say they have a fulfilled life?
Yes, and I think that what happens is that we have to look at the actual justification for how they are coming to this conclusion, and it ends up being self-defeating because they are lacking something. So they might think something, but they are confused about the truth of what they are thinking is true, or what the truth about what they are thinking. In the same way that there was a time when everybody thought the earth was flat. Everybody thought it was flat, but the earth was never flat, right? So, but people thought this. They were just confused because they had a lack of understanding. The same thing applies with people who are living this unfulfilled life, using drugs and alcohol, or doing some other immoral thing that's damaging society, hurting their chances of cooperation. And so they think they're living this good life, but they are confused in the same way that people are confused about the shape of the earth, or confused about anything else in life.
So just quickly, why isn't that a circular argument? Because you're sort of saying that, hey, that you've got to do these things to, have a fulfilled life, and all humans think that way. But the humans that don't, they're wrong because you've got to have these things to make a fulfilled life. Why isn't that a circular argument?
Because their life is lacking. So by definition of if the life is not lacking, then their life is lacking. So by definition, one fulfills one definition, one fulfills the other. To live a good life, it's fulfilled, it's not lacking. If it's lacking something, it's unfulfilled definitionally. What steps do you need to take to fulfill it versus what steps lead to it unfulfilled?
All right. I'm going to go ahead and move it into open dialogue. Gentlemen, I believe you should have, I think it's 40, is it 40 minutes? I'll give you 40 minutes on the clock, and we'll move into open dialogue. And then, of course, closing statements will come after that. The floor is open.
Awesome.
Mark, since you have the experience, I'll defer to you.
Oh, well, I wanted to continue that chain of thought, to be honest with you, because you're sort of saying, well, they're not fulfilled by my definition. So to me, it sounds like you're defining fulfilled as meeting these particular criteria, and then sort of saying, well, anybody that doesn't meet them is unfulfilled, and therefore they're lacking something. But I don't understand why they have to be fulfilled according to your definition instead of their own.
I think the definition, as far as I understand fulfillment, is to lack nothing, to be fulfilled.
Sure.
So there's nothing lacking. Am I missing that? Am I not understanding the correct definition of what fulfilled is?
Well, I think that fulfillment is sort of personal to you. Like, I may lack money and power or whatever, but be completely fulfilled in my life because I have what's important to me. But other people may have different value judgments on what makes them fulfilled. Like, for instance, somebody may only be fulfilled if they're a world-renowned author. That's not me. But, you know, I just don't know how you can tell that their criteria for fulfillment is somehow wrong.
I think that anything that is lacking, such as something that we ultimately desire. So
Right. Sure.
if we, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I agree.
He was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. So if we ultimately have a desire and we have a common desire, right, which is to have self-respect, for example, and which I think is a common desire that everybody ultimately shares as part of this fulfilled life. I think everybody ultimately wants to be able to look inside themselves and say, yeah, I'm happy with the person I am. I'm happy with the decisions I make. I think that this self-respect is a common trait or a common desire that's part of this, that fits into this definition of fulfillment that we all share. So then we would say, well, how are you gaining self-respect? Is being a great author, does that lead you to self-respect? That's outstanding. And you can make an argument for that. But did you step on everybody on your way up the ladder? Did you write stories about someone's personal life they didn't want shared? Or did you hurt people on the way? You know, then in this case, then you say, well, how are you justifying your self-respect? Is it self-defeating because you can't really respect yourself if you don't have fairness, right? Because without the virtue of fairness or justice, then you cannot justify your action. So it seems to me to be self-defeating at that point.
Well, I agree that we do have, like, sort of, you know, things like empathy, and what you're talking about is reciprocity, like not doing to other people what is unfair, basically. So I get that idea, but it doesn't really tell you, and this is what I'm talking about with the naturalist, the Hume's guillotine, because you're skipping part why we ought to follow these emotions when we don't have to, right? Like, we don't have to follow them. Plenty of people don't. Plenty of people say they're fulfilled without using their empathy or reciprocity. So I'm wondering where that ought is sort of coming from.
Yeah, I think in regards to the guillotine, I think that, as I mentioned, it gives us the best opportunity to succeed, the greatest opportunity to succeed. So we have this motivation that's inherent to the behavior itself. So when we're looking at the behavior, the combative behavior versus the cooperative behavior, ultimately we know that we're going to have a much greater chance of success and a more fulfilled existence through cooperative behavior. Then we would have a stronger motivation. It's not to say that we can't choose one or the other, but we should be more inclined to what's going to give us a more positive existence.
Well,
so I would think that this is
Yeah, no, I agree with that, according to what I think of it. Like, so because I want to have a fulfilled life, there's certain things that I ought to do. The question comes is why I ought to do that. And, you know, mostly it's sort of, you know, a desire. And you sort of mentioned if you want to be fulfilled. But what I'm sort of pointing at is this want to be fulfilled is still subjective. It's a subjective thing because it is a desire that is funneled through the mind.
I agree with you that they want to be to achieve a certain action can be subjective because we can choose whatever direction or actions we want. But I think that there are objective, because there are predictable and testable and repeatable consequences to specific actions. We can look at an objective standard for what actions will lead to which set of outcomes. So we could say, yeah, I want this set of outcomes or I want this set of outcomes. But if we're going to work towards a positive set of outcomes, which lead to the greatest benefit to society, to cooperation, which is what we've evolved to become as a cooperative species, we will act in a moral way, because morality is essentially, by definition, the good versus the bad, or the right, wrong, good versus evil, or however people want to phrase it. Morality infers that positive, immoral infers negative. So if we know that we're going to be more motivated to work towards a positive end, then we will look to see what clear steps can I take to reach this goal. The moral actions are going to be consistent. We don't determine that because it's consistent and it's objective. Whether we like it or agree with it, it will lead to this particular outcome. I might think that murdering everybody around me is great because it leads me to a particular outcome.
Right.
But ultimately, we know that society will collapse. And it will be to the detriment of myself and my children, my great-grandchildren, and people that I really care about. So structurally, if I want society to survive and to grow and flourish, I won't murder people. I won't kill everybody around me. So
okay, could you repeat that last sentence for me?
That ultimately, if I want to live in a society
if you want to, right, live in a society that people, is prosperous and stable, you don't go around killing people. But that started off with "if I want," right? So
I agree that oh, go ahead.
I'm wondering, how is that not subjective? Because you could say, if I want to destroy all society, which would be, I get you. I would think that's really, really bad, right? But that is a want of mine for society to be stable and a good place to be, a physically and psychologically nice place to live.
Yeah, I do agree that we can have wants in either direction.
Right.
But I think that because there's a certain standard of behavior that will lead predictably to specific outcomes, to justify what is good, we have to be able to epistemically then justify why it's good, who it's good for, what actually makes it as good. So if we ultimately find out that this is unjust, then we cannot justify unjustness. It's self-defeating at that point, it seems to me. So fairness is, we can justify treating like cases alike, but when we have an imbalance in this, we cannot justify what is my desire. Now, we could have the desire. I agree with you there. I do believe that we could write our own rules for anything, right? And we could call it good no matter what it is. But I don't think that we can necessarily justify it as being good epistemically, unless we can back that argument up to something that is substantiated by some kind of evidence. And if we can look at actual empirical data and say, killing people wantonly collapses society. We have data points that we can look at for this.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is, are you aware of metaethics? What metaethics is?
Yeah, and I tend to use morality and ethics in the same.
Okay. Well, metaethics isn't really moral. It's basically the goal that you're looking for. So, for instance, another person might be a theist, and they might have their metaethics as the glory of God. That's what they're trying to do, right? And as part of that, it may be to treat everybody with kindness and empathy and things like that. So their meta-ethical standard is something completely different from you, yet they've come to the same conclusion, for morality, be cooperative and, sort of get along with people and don't murder, and all of the same sort of, outcomes. But so if you're sort of going, well, the morality is objective, but it's only objective in virtue of your metaethics, in virtue of the goal you are looking for, right? Like it's only in virtue of that goal, then I would put it to you that it's still subjective, because that what leads you down that first path, that first step, is the goal that you're trying to achieve. Like if you don't go, well, I want to have a society where I don't want to be afraid for my life and my children brutalized and things like that, I am going to work towards it. I agree everything from that point, saying, hey, we know that, you know, if there's wars constantly breaking out, I'm in fear of my life. If you know, the government is allowed to just, you know, send your children into war, that's going to be objectively bad for that meta ethic, that goal of you know, not being afraid and your children being safe. But the meta ethic is still subjective, so you're still grounding that morality in subjectivity, and that's my position.
Well, so what do you think about, if I could ask you a few questions?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, sure.
I'm curious because there's so many different objective models, such as I mentioned Ayn Rand earlier. So I'm sure you're probably familiar with Ayn Rand objectivism, good that is, which sustains and furthers the life of rational beings, and that which harms or threatens would be then considered bad. So she comes out to this objective standard. She said, this is subjective, or I'm sorry, this is objective, because it's based on the fact that the reality, that observable nature of human beings as rational entities. So she's grounding this ultimately in our rationality. And I think that ration and reason is how Aquinas, actually he used natural law. It might have been, reason would be like Aristotle, Aristotle and Socrates and Plato all use reason as the way to ultimately discover these moral truths. So do you think that with Ayn Rand's philosophy here, is this still then applied to the same situation where you would say, well, it's still going to be subjective even though she's confused about this? Or do you think that she has come up with this objective standard? Do you think that, for example, with reason, with Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, these guys, do you think they have created this objective standard, or do you think they missed the boat?
Well, I think they've sort of, you know, their desire for reason is because that reason allows us to make good decisions, kind of thing. Like that's really what it allows us to make. But the question is why humans must make good decisions or should survive at all. Now, where we sort of have a survival mechanism, however, most famously in war and difficult times, we can override that. We have a choice. And even though, you know, we have this instinct to survive, it's not necessarily the case that we have to follow through on it, right? Like we can decide morally that sacrificing yourself for your country is a good thing, that is good. And I have no problem with that. But the whole idea that, well, it has to be that humanity has to survive, I think that is rooted in the fact that I'm a human and part of that species, and that is important to me, right? Not that objectively that the universe has to have humans survive. I don't know where that is a necessary feature of any kind of reality.
I would agree with you. I don't think that the human survival is a necessary feature in reality. I mean, I suppose it would be an interesting thought experiment to figure out, because of evolution, you know, there's probably human beings in other places where the planet could sustain human beings. I guess you know a lot more about that than I do. I don't know if human beings, or if there was another Earth, would human beings inevitably evolve, or is it there's too much randomness that's involved in that? But either way, I guess we're human beings here and now. So if we do have an inclination to survival, we are structured in such a way that we have reason, we have self-reflection, that we desire self-respect, things of this nature. There are specific actions that we know we can take. Aren't those actions defined as moral? Because you've used the word good a number of times in this general sense of what we see in nature. Like it's, you know, for our survival, this behavior is good. Isn't that how what we were talking about morality, for example, that's really what we're talking about, is what actions are good to meet a end goal. So if our end goal is survival.
I guess I'm confusing terms here, and I do apologize, that's my fault, because the way that I'm using good when talking about something evolving, for instance, something's good in evolution if it simply works for the survival of that species, right? Like that's how we see it as basically effective. But that, that's not the same as a moral good, what we ought to do, right? Like that's not the same thing. So I do apologize. It's just I'm using the word good in terms of evolution over basically effectiveness, right? I'm not talking about sort of a moral good in evolution, because as I pointed out, there's things like humans have violent tendencies that evolve naturally. There's stuff like bias, for instance, right? Like the bias is something that we see, that we sort of prioritize our close family and then people outside of it, and then the next country way down the list, and then a country far away with a different culture as well. We have these biases within us, which has also evolved naturally. So I don't see sort of a survival instinct as being inherently morally good. What I'm saying is it's good in evolution because it is basically, survival is the idea of evolution, so it's effective, if that makes sense. I'm not sort of saying it is automatically good.
No, I appreciate the clarification. I was understanding it in those terms of it is good in that it leads to a particular goal. So if we imagine the goal is survival, which it appears to be, because we have a survival instinct, even though, like you say, we can override this, I think it's a natural instinct that we have to survive. So I'd agree with you there that's how I would define good. I guess what I'm confused about that is when we talk about morality, we're talking about what ought we do versus what ought not do. So if our goal naturally is we have a proclivity towards survival, wouldn't it make sense logically that our goals should align, our oughts would align with what this natural end goal would be, or this natural instinct would be? Because it seems like we'd be working against our own natural instinct for survival to do what we ought not to do. So we don't drink battery acid with my breakfast cereal because that's going to be detrimental to my natural instinct for survival, for example. So wouldn't morality define these actions in this way of oughts and ought nots based on what we ultimately would determine is good, not good because we're trying to, how would I explain this? I'm sorry. This cold medicine's got me a little bit loopy, but I'm trying to think here.
I got you. I think that, like we have a proclivity to survive, but we do have the option not to. And like with evolution, evolution doesn't have any real moral weight to how things ought to behave. In fact, the longest lived organisms, like insects, for instance, they may hold none of the moral free will or self-improvement or anything like this. So I really think there's a problem with sort of in the Hume's guillotine, the is-ought gap between saying, okay, this is how humans have evolved, how we've survived, and how we ought to behave in the future to survive. Because like I've said, like violence against other tribal groups has been an inherent part of human evolution as well. But we're sort of going, well, we ought not do that. And there comes the question of, well, 99% of species have gone extinct. So if that amount of species have gone extinct, why ought humans as a species survive? And don't get me wrong, I think we should, because I'm human, right? Like that is in my best interest. But at the same time, I have to say, well, that's, the average, giraffe, if they're aware of it, if they suddenly had a brainwave from a giraffe and said, oh, well, I want giraffes to survive, that would be purely subjective. They probably wouldn't have a brainwave and go, well, I want humans to flourish all over the earth. What I'm sort of saying is that evolution has thrown up all of these different organisms, but really it is from the subjective perspective of that organism why their species should survive. And don't get me wrong, it's almost ubiquitous, except a lot of species haven't, and evolution doesn't seem to have any fear or favor where it comes to morals on how they behave.
That makes sense. I think that given that ultimately it seems to be, and again, evolution is much more your strong suit than mine, but it seems to be, in my limited understanding, that every species, if I'm using the right term, has specific traits or features that make it unique, which is how we categorize or classify different things. That human beings have our own unique traits. So we have like the ability, as I mentioned, introspection, right? We can reflect, self-reflect. We can examine our lives and put value judgments on things like survival. So we could add even additional value above and beyond just the survival mechanism that the giraffe or the slime mold or whatever else has inherently. So I think we could agree that every living organism appears to have a proclivity for survival. Otherwise, they wouldn't be around, right? They wouldn't survive. So what is survived wanted to survive or was driven to survival. But with morality, we're giving ourselves a way to assess values to what gives us the better existence, what is more likely to help us survive. So in cooperation, above like the wolves or the sardines that swim together or something like that, the wolves that run together, we have an ability to think more deeply about what steps can I take in advance to assist my ability to increase my chances of survival. Morality feeds into all of this. And isn't that then guided ultimately by looking at nature and what nature is offering us as a specific species?
Well, I think that's where the naturalistic fallacy kicks in. Like if we look at nature, it has to be good because it comes from nature is a fallacy. And my example was sort of cyanide comes from nature. It doesn't make it good. Humans also have don't get me wrong, the introspection thing, I think you are right. We are definitely the only species that has such a self-awareness. I'm not arguing with you, although it is hard to tell how much other animals think about themselves. We can only do things like mirror tests that like elephants seem to be aware of, we put a chalk line on them, and if they try to wipe it off the mirror, then they're not aware. But some of them know that it's on themselves. They're aware of themselves. So it's hard to say how much introspection they have. But what I'm sort of saying is that there's nothing to sort of say humans have to survive, nothing objective. It seems to be, and even though, and I agree that we have a natural inborn instinct to survive, but we still make a conscious decision to do so. And in that decision, we are using a preference, a bias, if you will, for humans rather than other animals, or rather than other people, or rather than other things. And that, I think, is still subjective, even though we have a survivor. Oh, look, there's another trait that humans have that people are sort of unaware of. Apart from our big brains, there's also, we also sweat, which is done very, very rarely throughout the animal kingdom. Almost no other mammal sweats at all. And humans have the capacity to sweat and cool ourselves off, right? So does that mean we should hunt animals as, using endurance methods? We used to run after animals, wait till they collapse, basically using our endurance to tire them out. Does that mean we still ought to do that because that is the way we've evolved? Or ought we do something different?
That is interesting. I'd have to think about that.
What's the name for it? Persistence hunting. Yeah, persistence hunting. Yep.
So this is because, like, I'm trying to think. So like the dogs. When I had dogs, they pant. Their tongue.
Yeah, that's their system. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So that is interesting. I didn't even know that about humans, that we're the only animals that could do that.
Horses sweat a little bit. They have a foam that goes over them. But dogs, they get rid of heat by panting. Humans basically sweat, and that cools our bodies off.
So with this analogy, and this is new to me, so I'm trying to do this on the fly here.
No worries.
With this analogy, ought we chase down animals still? I think if we didn't have a better method of hunting or surviving, of attaining our food, right, and we would continue to do this. But I think if we could improve on this process, then we could do something that's more efficient over time.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time. It might be the cold medicine. I'm really having a hard time with this flu, but it might be, I'm having a hard time connecting the dots between things that we do purely for physical reasons, as opposed to assessing particular value judgment, having the ability to put value judgments on things above and beyond, such as, that's why I was talking about the self-reflection, so that we could actually have an added sense of value to survival itself. Because I think that we could look at survival as a starting point, and then we could say what gives us the most comfortable survival. So instead of sleeping in bear caves, we build houses now because it's a better, more comfortable existence. But it's still based on the fact that ultimately we do want to exist. You mentioned the natural fallacy. What is natural is not always what is good. And I do agree with you, because like, I think your example is, cyanide is a natural substance, but we don't want to ingest it just because it's natural. And I do agree with you 100%, but I'm confused as if something, just because something is natural, if we use it in an unnatural way, like humans have an aversion to doing things that are harmful, generally speaking, because we do want to live a more comfortable life. So even with things like drugs and alcohol, for example, people that use drugs and alcohol, a lot of people may not realize this, the significant majority of them are not doing it for a good time. They're doing it to avoid other types of pain, depression, sadness, anxiety, things of this nature. It's not because sticking needles in your arm or ingesting poison into your body is a good time. It's really not. The part of the addiction with drugs and alcohol is you learn the behavior, the uncomfortableness of it, the anxiety of going and obtaining your drugs illegally, and the adrenaline, all this factors into the addiction process, which makes it very difficult to overcome for a lot of people. But none of this is really considered ultimately good. People would ideally not be doing this. They would fulfill themselves in other ways. So I think that they have a tendency to do things that are unhealthy, that these substances are all natural. Sometimes I guess we make them in labs nowadays, but a lot of drugs, they would just grow naturally, like poppies or marijuana or whatever people are into, alcohol, natural stuff. So just because people can use it for an unhealthy way, I think ultimately our preference would be to attain these same benefits of being free of our depression, free of our anxiety, free of all this stuff by choosing a more healthy method. So our motivation for most people don't get inebriated because there's a better way to exist in life. So just because something is natural, I don't think that we can say it's a fallacy to just point at a better existence naturally, unless I misunderstood the way you mentioned that fallacy. I've never heard of that fallacy before, so I'm trying to understand how that applies to making good decisions.
Well, the naturalistic fallacy is sort of pointing at something that exists in nature or has a natural origin and saying that it's better for you. Like, for instance, sort of saying, hey, home birth is better than cesarean section because it's more natural. And that might not be the case. A cesarean's probably safer because you are in a hospital, which, most things that you encounter in a hospital are not natural, right? They're artificial. They're artificially made. Now, it may be your preference to have a home birth. I totally respect it. You can if you want to, not a problem. But, it's a fallacy to say it is better simply because it is the natural way to give birth to a child rather than something artificial. That may or may not be the case. Like, it may be the case that the natural thing is better, but really what I'm sort of saying is better for what reason? If your concern is safety, then yes, the being in a hospital is better than having a home birth. If your concern is, I don't want to put things into my body, then what I'm saying is that it is better to have a home birth because you probably will get drugs and other things in hospital in order to help with the birth. So what I'm sort of saying is, and this ties back into my idea of meta-ethics, that goal is subjective. Like, whether you want a home birth or whether you want to do a birth in a hospital is entirely subjective. That's, your desires, just like it's your desire to have a fulfilled life or, run amok, basically. But the methodology, the way you carry that out then flows from that desire. Do you get what I mean? Like, so then it's objective whether, the home birth is better if you don't want drugs or doctors or anything. That's better or good or moral. But if you do want to be safer, the hospital birth is better, and that is simply in virtue of the goal that you're after.
Okay, I do understand. And so then I guess what I'm wondering is, if we have established, or I feel like we've established, whether we agree it's objective or subjective, set that aside from it. I think we've agreed that there is a easier, more productive way to live life or form organized societies without murdering people, without stealing from people and stuff. This seems to feed into cooperation, and cooperation seems to be an easier way for us because we are a cooperative species. Not to say we have to do this, but it seems to be the downhill path as opposed to having to climb the hill, right? That gravity's working with us. So wouldn't this be the justification for the natural, is because it seems to be easier or better or more leading towards our ultimate goal of having to have less resistance to attain our goals? Would that was because I'm just curious, if we apply nature to any solution, are we automatically committing this fallacy?
No. I mean, the thing about fallacies is it doesn't make you wrong, right? Like, so a fallacy doesn't mean automatically you're wrong. Something might be from nature and be the best solution that you have for the problem, right? It may be that is the case, right? But it means that argument should be discarded, because if you're simply saying it is good because it is natural, that's where I have the problem. You may very well be right. It may be that thing from nature is actually good, but that argument doesn't follow, because you know, it doesn't automatically mean that you're wrong. It just means that argument doesn't follow that it's good just because it's from nature. But the question that I sort of have is, and when you say most people, I would imagine, and it is my opinion, that if something was objectively true for these meta-ethical goals, right, for this, hey, we want to improve and have a flourishing society and all of this, it wouldn't be most people. It would generally be everybody wants to make society better. And I do note that there are people like hermits, for instance, or people off the grid. They go out, they don't go anywhere near people, they whittle for the rest of their lives. I don't know what they do out there, but they really, you know, they say they're fulfilled. And I don't feel like I should be able to say, no, you're not fulfilled. You've got to come back to society. You've got to work on this. You've got to work on that. You know, it's up to me how you're fulfilled, even though what they're doing, you know, we know that humans are very susceptible to dying alone, right? Like, we're not very durable creatures when solo. And, you know, anybody that's a survivalist that, you know, like Bear Grylls it out there will tell you it's very difficult to survive alone. And it's not good for society because they're just basically taking themselves away from it, you know, and sort of leaving society to do whatever it wants. But, you know, they say they're fulfilled, and I you know, how do you know they're not fulfilled?
No, I think they can be fulfilled living, you know, out in the woods or whittling away, like you said. That's hilarious. I think they certainly can be fulfilled. I don't think that living, you know, with a group of people or living by yourself, you know, necessarily has to do with fulfillment. I think it's how you behave in either situation that leads to self-respect. So if you can attain self-respect, then you have a fulfilled life. You're not lacking self-respect. But if you're lacking in anything, that by definition, to me, it seems like you cannot ultimately have a fulfilled life. So whatever you might be lacking, in this case, if your behavior is ethical or virtuous, right? If you're fair, if you could justify your actions within the structure of the society or the situation that you're in, then you're living this fulfilled life. I think a hermit can live a fulfilled life. I don't think a hermit can live a fulfilled life if he's out in the woods kicking puppies or something random like that. But if he's whittling or doing whatever, I think that, you know, there's no problem him living this fulfilled life. I think that what we're coming down to, unless I'm missing something here, it seems like what we're saying is, hey, everything is subjective, so therefore might makes right. And we just got to cross our fingers and hope that the strongest people are the nicest people, because we have no objective standard to look at how we're going to regulate, you know, laws, or how we're going to tell people what they ought to do or ought not to do. If they're the strongest people, then whatever they do is fine because it's subjective. That seems to be the direction that subjective morality is leading us to, without some kind of objective standard that we can look at.
Yeah, and
Is that fair?
Well, so I basically will base it in empathy and reciprocity again. Like, most people will not agree that they feel fulfilled, going and kicking puppies, as you sort of said. It is the case that sort of a lot of us agree on a society that is equitable and fair and has all of these virtues to it. When you say might makes right, I think that's why morality is very important, that a code of conduct and sort of the ethical code of conduct across a society is really important. It's just what you seem to be doing is an appeal to consequence. You're basically saying, and I've heard it a lot from theists, that if there's no more objective morals, then it's just a free-for-all where anybody can do what they want. And whether or not that is true has nothing to do with the consequences of it. So I think that morality is really important. Just like, for instance, laws are subjective, right? Like, would you agree that laws are subjective? They're just things that we made up. Right. So that doesn't mean laws are not important. They're really important, right? The legal system and the laws that we have preventing that behavior is incredibly important. It's sort of a common myth that if something's subjective, then it's not important. And I don't think that's the case. I think that it's incredibly important, even more so because there is no objective standard in the world. We have to create it for what we desire in the world. And so, I simply have confidence in my fellow humans, basically, wanting similar things to me. But the problem when you get into moral objectivity, as far as I'm concerned, is you have people disagree on what that objective thing is. And then you have, people saying, hey, your way's not good because we're trying to have, self-respect. And another person says, no, we've got to, take care of everybody, kind of thing. And then that's a disagreement on what the objective is. Where I'm just looking for moral compatibility, sort of a core moral values that overlap, and we can make society together. If I disagree, then, that's something that we have to intersubjectively talk about in the society and convince people that the way that I am suggesting gets them to their goals rather than the way the other person's suggesting. So when you say might makes right, I think that is the objective fact of the universe, but there is no reason to run our societies under might makes right.
Yeah, I do think that. So for me, because I actually believe in virtue ethics, so I believe that the virtues give us a logical epistemic reason to justify our moral claims. And in particular, virtues like, all the virtues I think are paramount. I think the fundamental virtue being wisdom, which basically without wisdom, we're not able to process information correctly. So if we have wisdom, then we can really properly judge, properly value every situation. But other virtues such as fairness, for example, so we talk about the might makes right, the subjective standard. If people are, the strongest people get to make the rules, which seems to be the way it is, whether we like it or not. The strongest people have been making the rules. The history is written by the victor, I guess, is one way to put that. So because of this, I think that what has given us the ability to like revolt against slavery, for example, right, is that it wasn't just the slaves themselves. Free people made up the majority of the people fighting against slavery, right? Because they were able to look and say, human beings have this inherent value. And I think that's really what I do base this objective standard on. And I think kind of what like Ayn Rand, when I talk about reason, and I think even with Socrates and the other philosophers that I had mentioned, Kant does the same thing. Aquinas does the same thing. And they come from not just religious views, but some of these are atheists and religious as well, et cetera. I think that they're really coming from the same place that I'm coming from, that human beings have an inherent value. And if we establish or can agree that there is this inherent value to humanness, then we can create an objective standard that we can look at the slave owners, or we can look at the Hitlers, or we can look at whoever and say, hey, listen, because of this value that we all share equally, which is one of the syllogism I had laid out about agency, because we share this agency, right? We set goals and take actions. It's how we're born, or how we evolved, I guess is the way to put it. So we could look at that and say that's across the board. The women have it, the men have it. So we should have equality among the sexes. Doesn't matter what color your skin is, what your religion is. Everybody has this same quality that we're sharing, the same value. And if we could build an objective standard from that, I think it seems to be a much more effective way to justify our actions of revolt against the Hitlers or against the slave owners. But I just don't understand how we could justify telling a slave owner or a Hitler, you're wrong, if we don't have something solid that we can stand on that we can build our argument up from that. Something that's objective that Hitler and the rest of the world that wants to fight as our allies could look at and say, hey, they're right. Human beings have this inherent value. This is how I try to act in my own life. And even though not everybody likes me, obviously, I'm very well liked in general because I value every human being equally. And I get a very good reaction with people. Even if people don't agree with my ideas or think I'm really ugly or stupid, doesn't matter. I generally have a really good relationship with people because I treat everybody equally. And I think that there's an objective standard that we can all build from if we do that. That's where I get my concern with the might make.
Just quickly, that's an appeal to consequence. You're basically saying if we don't have an objective morality, there's no way we can challenge, the Hitlers of the world, the Mussolinis of the world, and all of that kind of thing, right? Like that's an argument from consequence. It doesn't follow because you gain some advantage to it being true that it has to be true, right? Like what I'm saying is, I don't see the objective morality, and then you're saying, well, if we don't have it, it makes it difficult to do this or difficult to do that. That's irrelevant to whether it's true or not. Absolutely irrelevant. And I think that all life has inherent worth just because it's very, very, we've only found one planet with life and the universe seems to be a massive place. So at the moment, it seems incredibly rare. So based upon that, you can assign some value, but, past that, you're really making a distinction that, I favor humans over, say, giraffes, whereas giraffes would favor giraffes over humans. And you're really making that distinction, I think, because you're human. And that's okay. I value humans equally as well, but it's not because I think there's something objective there. I think it's because I'm human.
And I wanted to take a moment to, as a kind reminder, we will be opening up the panel for anyone who would like to join the discussion. I have dropped that link into the chat. All you have to do is click it and go ahead and start heading backstage now. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Objective Ethics for his closing statement. And
actually, Mark would go first, and then I would go.
He's the affirmative. Yes, he started.
Yeah,
you start
bookmarked.
this, and then he has the last word. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
okay.
It's just debates are bookmarked, so it's bookended. So it's basically like at both ends you have a bookend, so the person at the start finishes at the end. Technically, according to debate, law or whatever.
Yeah.
That's my fault. I'm sorry, my lack of experience. I didn't know.
Oh, it's no problem.
That's okay. He who has the first word also has the last word, especially when you were on the affirmative. So we'll go ahead and do closing statements, and then we'll get over to the super chats and read the questions. Objective Ethics, I will leave the floor to you, sir.
I think the empirical evidence for objective morality is found in Human Flourishing, and I already mentioned Dr. Carrier's peer-reviewed work in support of objective morality, as well as numerous contemporary scholars, Ayn Rand, David Brink, John McDowell, Peter Railton, Jeffrey Sayer McCord, Michael Smith, Peter Singer, and Thomas Nagel. I would like to cite some of the greatest philosophical minds in history who also support objective morality. Natural law from Aquinas is a philosophical and legal theory that posits the existence of a set of inherent laws derived from nature and universal moral principles, which are discoverable through reason. In ethics, natural law theory asserts that certain rights and moral values are inherent in human nature and can be understood universally, independent of enacted laws or societal norms. Immanuel Kant believed that morality is the objective law of reason, just as objective physical laws necessitate physical actions. For example, apples fall down because of gravity. Objective rational moral laws necessitate rational moral actions. Therefore, according to Kant, rational morality is universal and cannot change depending on circumstances. I mentioned earlier Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Aristotle's ethics is built around the premise that people should achieve an excellent character by practicing virtue in order to ultimately attain well-being. It is sometimes referred to in comparison to later ethical theories known as character-based ethics. Like Plato and Socrates, Aristotle emphasized the importance of reason and that there were logical and natural reasons for humans to behave ethically and try to become morally virtuous. I think my voice is giving out here. I want to leave you with this comment from my opening. Subjective morality holds a high burden of proof, and that burden of proof, I don't know if we established either way. If subjective morality is correct, it becomes extremely hard to explain how moral judgments can appear in conditional statements, how moral judgments can appear in logical arguments, how such arguments can be valid, or how moral reasoning works at all. I would just like to close by thanking Mark for taking time out of his busy schedule to debate with me today. I really learned a lot from speaking with him, and I really enjoyed the engagement. It really tested me, and I appreciate that so much. I also appreciate Sarah for hosting this, and I know that I don't have a lot of clout or a lot of notoriety, so for her to let me come on her platform is very gracious of her. I would encourage everyone to check out my YouTube channel. I host an open panel for live discussion every Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern. That is at Objective Ethics on YouTube. And I think I'll go ahead and relinquish the rest of my time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Mark, your closing statement, please.
Yeah, and I really want to thank Objective Ethics. I sort of, knew he was believing in objective morality and sort of challenged him to a debate, and he was gracious enough to accept. And this was really fun. I had a really good time. I hope you did too. And thank you so much, Sarah. This was actually a lot of fun. So with the problem of objective versus subjective, this isn't a hill that I would die on. Okay, so for those who will sort of like, well, you just want it to be, no, I don't want anything to be subjective. That's the thing. I would like there to be some sort of solid moral law that gives us our oughts, sort of moral facts that give us our oughts without it. But what is true and what is not true is not dependent on what I want. It's dependent on what is. And I sort of have mentioned a couple of times the sort of argument from consequence. Well, if there is no solid moral facts out there, then people can run around doing whatever they want. And my answer is yes, and they generally do. The only thing that we can do is sort of put there well, if you want these consequences, then you will or will not do these actions to get to them, because the outcomes of these actions will point towards certain outcomes. Now, I think that most people, almost all people, and I agree with objective ethics, almost all people will say, hey, we want to have a flourishing society. I want my rights respected. I want other people respected. I want to be kind to people. I want people to be kind to me. All of these things hold true, but that does not make them objective any more than everybody saying, hey, ice cream is nice makes that objective, because it isn't. There's also the problem of Hume's is-ought gap that I mentioned a few times. And to me, during the debate, it really wasn't, that gap wasn't bridged. And it is one of the big philosophical problems. How do you say there is something in the world or in nature or an aspect of ourselves and say, well, you ought to follow that? Because it does not seem to be a requirement of humanity to do so. It is more, for instance, you have empathy and reciprocity. They're the foundations of morality because they are an inbuilt feeling within humans. We feel good when we are empathic and when we reciprocate with fairness and camaraderie and have people as our equals. But there's a problem with Hume's is-ought, that just because that is the case that you feel good, why ought you do that? It is because you want to feel good, and that's where the subjectivity lies. I want to have a flourishing society where I feel good, so I ought to do these things. And there isn't really a problem with that. Like I said, I'm not looking for people to, suddenly convert to my side. All I'm looking for is moral compatibility. If there is sort of a Christian out there who believes that you should treat people with respect, that you should get along with people, that, you should love people, that our society should prosper, there should be, the shared results shared between people, especially the poor, I will agree with 99% of their moral principles. But I don't think there is an objective standard that says this is how you ought to behave, aside from what result you want. And I think that nearly everybody doesn't want a dystopian future where everybody is miserable. I think that that would be awful. But the question is there something independent than our minds not wanting it that determines that to be so? And if not, and I get that objective ethics sort of says, well, if it's a goal that you're after, a meta-ethical goal that you're after, you have objective ways to get to it. I have no problem with, totally agree. But I do have to concede that that goal itself seems to be a subjective thing, what we want for ourselves. And that's why it's important. Now, I can sort of call somebody immoral under their own system. So if somebody says, oh, I want to, raise the Third Reich and make Germany extra prosperous and, do all of these things. And if I throw out the Jews, then suddenly the economy will be fantastic. I can say that's immoral, even under his meta-ethical goal, because that will not lead to what he is trying to get to. So I can sort of say that. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about morality, we're just talking about what we ought to do, in my opinion, what we ought to do in order to get to the meta-ethical goal that we want to get to. And I will wind it up there. Thank you so much for your time. And give a like, subscribe, do all the things. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been such a pleasant debate. I love it when everybody gets along and they don't start yelling at people. And just a shout out, I've got to Michael backstage. I just need one quick cam up from you back there, and we'll be good to go. Otherwise, I do have the thank you. You're good. You're good back there. For the donos, Fourth Wiseman comes in, and you are both welcome to respond to either of these, or you can just tell them to go away. It doesn't matter. Fourth Wiseman says subjective morality leads to the Pied Piper dancing away with tunes for children. Any thoughts there, boys?
I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean exactly. I think it's sort of saying if there's no morality, then people just do whatever they want. And if that was sort of, if we lived in a vacuum where I was the only person, that might be true. But instead, sort of what we were making the distinction, there's also morals across the society, things that we agree on. And that's more or less how societies form. We all agree that, hey, the Pied Piper dancing away with tunes for children is a bad thing to do. But also don't forget that that society didn't pay the Pied Piper for their services as well. Don't forget that.
Good point. Objective ethics. Any thought there?
I mean, I love that. It's funny, but I do think that it does make me think of the consequential, the appeal to consequences that Mark had brought up. And I had other notes which I had prepared earlier. I'm fighting a terrible flu. I lost half of my stuff, so I was really not able to respond very well. So I'm trying to do this from memory, but basically, there are some things in regards to the guillotine that we can assume are the case. So we have, excuse me, we have what we call, I think it's called, referred to as essentially like a hidden premise. So if we have a particular goal that we assume, such as we want to survive or we want to live this good life, I was trying to articulate that and I did not do a good job, but I think that we want to protect our children. So we should look for an objective standard to rely on. I think one could follow the other logically if we assume that we have this goal. If we don't assume that we have this goal, then I do see it becomes a problem, like this specific, we're just appealing to the consequence. But if we presume that we want to protect our children, and that seems to be the natural inclination to everybody, that ultimately want to protect children, then I do think that we could look to the consequence as evidence for an objective standard. But I think ultimately Mark is right that if we don't have this goal, then we can't just jump from one to the other. We have to have that hidden premise or that bridge, so to speak. And so I think the Pied Piper, while it is a funny analogy, I think without establishing something about the value that the children have or something of that nature, it seems grotesque, but I don't think we've established that it can be necessarily objective. I didn't do a strong enough job tonight with that.
Fair enough. Powdered Dusty comes in with a big 10, says if morality were objective, we wouldn't be having this debate. Any thoughts to that, gentlemen?
Go for it, OE. It's towards you.
I don't even know what to
Oh,
say to
yeah.
that. I mean, I think that's pretty clever.
I don't think so, Dusty. That's like saying if the shape of the Earth was objective, we wouldn't be arguing about the shape. And I've seen flat Earth debates, millions of them, mate. So that isn't evidence that it is actually, subjective. Because as far as I'm aware, the shape of the Earth is objective, and we debate about it all the time. So, yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. And as a kind reminder, I have been dropping the open panel link into my live chat. If you'd like to join and further discuss, I've got a few back there, and we do have room for more. Powder Dusty also says, all clout to the 10th man. I'm surprised 10th man isn't jumping backstage yet. Maybe he's still showering, as he told us in the chat earlier. Fourth Wiseman comes with a big 10, says, I take the high road objectively. Others may take the low road subjectively. I have no reason to be able to complain. Others complain until they become objective of their subjection. I'll leave it to you, gentlemen.
Well,
Do you want me to go first? Yeah, I think this is essentially what. Oh, I'm sorry, brother. I thought you said yes. Okay. Yeah, this is essentially, if I'm following what the brother's saying here, this is essentially what I was trying to get at, is that if there isn't something objective that we can look at, that we can measure against, I don't know how we can establish a particular value system. I mean, it's just my opinion versus the other person's opinion. So if we look at some objective standard that's outside of opinion, then we can start to measure. So, like the rules of chess, once those are established, right, then we can make objectively good moves or objectively bad moves. So if nature establishes the rule for our human flourishing, from that, once that's established, we can make objectively good decisions or objectively bad decisions, is how I would answer that.
Yeah, and I think that sort of high road and low road suggests a moral standard in and of itself. Sort of when you take the high road, usually you're taking the sort of, what you see as more ethical or more moral road kind of thing. So it's a bit of a weird statement. I don't think there is a high road and a low road. I think there is just the ontology, the actuality of whether morality is objective or not. And I like the chess analogy. I think I heard Matt Delahunty say that one. It's a really good analogy. But sort of what I would put to you is that if the rules of chess are subjective, which we know they are, then it means that all of the moves are in virtue of that subjective rules. So they're subjective as well. They're only objective in virtue of those rules. And hey, we might have decided to play backgammon. We might have decided to play something altogether different. And then the rules of chess, or the moves that you want to make, they're not even applicable.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I know we're not still debating, but
yeah.
I agree with you 100%, brother. I think, and that may not have been the best analogy, only in a sense that what I tried to basically just say, well, the nature sets the rules for the game of life.
Okay, gotcha.
And nature's objective. So I agree with you 100%. We do subjectively set. I use this analogy when I talk to Christians about divine command theory, right?
Okay,
God
gotcha.
sets the rules, so God is still subjective, even though the rules they can claim are objective. So
right. Gotcha,
for my analogy, it probably wasn't the best.
Oh no, it's fine.
Fair enough. Perfect. Michael says, with the big 5, says, I've been moving stuff out of the garage unit all day, and this debate is just what I need in my ears for the last truckload. Michael is backstage ready to come up and add to the conversation, so I'm excited. It sounds like you got the storage unit all set and good to go, and you're ready to come play. Thank you so much. Fourth Wiseman says, here's your cup. He puts a picture of the cup and says, now look at it and decide if it's half full or half empty. Thoughts, gentlemen?
The optimist says that it's half full. The pessimist says that it's half empty. And the engineer says that cup is twice as big as it needs to be.
Fair enough. Anything from you, objective?
No, I can't follow that act. There's no way.
That's pretty good. Robin comes in and says, would is it determinism?
Determinism.
Okay, I was like, why is there an L in there? Change subjectivity.
Oof, good question, Robin. Good question. So hard determinism is sort of the idea that your actions and the actions that you make has no free will in it. You are just going through a series of determined by prior event causal actions in order to, you know, reach a goal that is predetermined by the prior events. So in that case, my question is, would morality really even exist at that point? If you have no capacity to take any action, there is no ought, there is only what you do. And I think morality kind of, I mean, hard determinism is a bit of a weird one. I don't think it's falsifiable. It's not provable, it's not falsifiable, neither is sort of free will. It's kind of one of those things that we just argue about. And I mean, it's fun to argue, but, you know, we can't really drill down on it. But I think it would change it to, well, their objective actions determined by prior events. But I think at that point, morality would be meaningless because there is no what you ought to do, because what you ought to do is what you do.
Yeah, I actually do. I have considered this. I haven't really fully developed an argument around it, but I do think that it is very applicable. I really like this question. I do not subscribe to hard determinism. However, I do not believe in free will either. There is actually an argument to be made for what we call will or conscious choices that we can make. However, there are outside influence. Our environment affects the number of choices that we have. So the choices are extremely limited. So we can't really have free will. Once you put free in front of will, it becomes kind of self-defeating. You can look at a number of different ways to say, well, we don't really have free will. We have the ability to make certain choices. Hard determinism, as Mark said, it's really difficult to prove or falsify because to what extent are these outside environment, outside influences really affecting our decision making? But I do think there's a really strong argument to make for a soft determinism. And in this case, I think it would depend on how we're defining morality. If we have the ability to make a limited number of choices, and yet our choices are heavily influenced by deterministic values, it's because motive is what we really use to make choices. All of our choices are driven by motive. And so morality then could be argued that it leads to, we have increased motive for particular behaviors, and those behaviors lead to determined outcomes, which is kind of what I was trying to kind of wedge in earlier, talking about, well, we have observable, testable, predictable, repeatable actions. So we could look at, we could consider this almost an empirical data set for certain behaviors to consequences. And I think soft determinism and morality are cohesive. Once we get to hard determinism, I think I'm with Mark. I don't know if we could really put an ought in that at that point. With hard determinism, it seems incoherent, and I don't believe in free will. So I would have to say only the moral question only comes into play if there's like a middle ground, a soft determinism or a conscious decision making.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Fourth Wiseman also comes up with another 10. It says, when you enter a turbulent current knowingly and you must cross through it, you soon learn aerodynamics and hydrodynamics, morphing into a form of least resistance that can endure the torrent. Torrent? Torrent? I don't know what a torrent is. Is that a word?
Yeah, yes, it's just a like you have a torrent of rain. It's a sudden onpouring of rain or something. Like it's a sudden and gushing sort of force of water. Also a way to pirate things, but never mind. So yeah, I don't disagree. Like you'll for instance, what's a good one? A riptide, right? If you're familiar with the beach, a rip is something that drags people out to sea. And counterintuitively, the best way to get out of a rip is to swim not towards the shore, not to where you want to be. It's actually to go with it or swim diagonally out and get out of the rip and then back in. So, you know, there's certainly objective ways to achieve those goals, and I don't disagree. You will eventually learn what those ways are in order to produce the outcome of, you know, the least resistance kind of thing. So the least resistance to a productive and happy society, you know, and I think over time we've learned that the least resistance to that is to sort of not have slaves, don't do, you know, sacrificial killings, all of this stuff we sort of learnt as we've gone along. But the question is that is ought gap of why do you have to cross? Why ought you cross that torrent kind of thing? Why ought you get there in the first? It's sort of a why did the chicken cross the road in the first place? It's not about whether objectively it's the best way to cross. It's why do it in the first place? Why ought we do it in the first place? And that's really where the bone of contention in this debate is. Just the goal that we're after, whether that's objective or that's not objective. I don't want to speak for objective ethics, but that's what it seems like to me.
Perfect.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with Mark and basically everything he said. I do think that is our impasse of this debate. I believe that and tried to argue for this natural goal, this inherent value system that human beings have, and all these different ways that I could establish that there is this value, there is this goal, something on the other side of the river that we naturally have a proclivity to. And that doesn't necessarily mandate that we will do this, but this is where we get our oughts, not our is's from, is we ought to maybe do what we are inclined to do. And I think that once we agree, and I think Mark and I are on the same page with this part, is if we can agree that we have this goal, then there is an objective standard of how we can best reach or attain that goal. So that's how I funnel morality and my understanding of morality. But I think that's where Mark and I have the difference is, is there this objective goal? Is there this objective value in humans? Is there this objective, or is it something that we, and we call ourselves good people, and maybe we have a right to feel like we're good people. We both agree that people have a value. Mark and I are in the same, very much the same. We want to treat people with respect. I've been very glad to know Mark. He's a very nice person because of that thing. So it's whether that goal is objective or not. I think we have not established either way.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Jason Reeves sends in the Big 10 to say, for the great content, yes, provided by both Mark and Objective Ethics. Thank you, gentlemen. Iotin dropping by to send in some tomato love. Thank you so kindly. We love you back. Fourth Wiseman also says, this will get their thinking noggins on high road, low road.
Okay.
Any thoughts? I don't know.
Look, take the high road if you want to gain altitude, take the low road if you want to lose altitude. I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that.
Yeah. I'm guessing maybe the morality spin on that. I don't know.
I think we did touch on that a few times with a few of the other questions. It's kind of the same concept is what value system are we going to use to determine which is which?
Fair enough. And last one is Bionic Latino. Interesting name. Comes with a Big 10. Says culture, the privilege of violence, the zero-sum game, and the self, us versus other, them divide, make objective morality a jellyfish nailed to the wall. Objective ethics. Any thoughts on that one?
It's always good to see my brother, Bionic Latino. He's been such a supporter of my channel from the very beginning. And that's all I can say to that.
Fair enough. Mark, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, I think that is true. I think that sort of there's these things that people will say that will get us to, if somebody is saying, hey, the zero-sum game is the best way to create a flourishing society, that's probably not true. Like that will not get you to a flourishing society where you're basically taking from others in order to get for yourself. I think that, culture and self versus other, them divide. It depends, because if you want the best society, you're probably going to want to at least sort of bring in as many people to that society with commonly held values as you can, because, conflicts in values will make problems. So, but yeah, I do agree. Sorry, I'm just sort of rambling. I do agree.
Perfect. Awesome. Gentlemen, I wanted to give you both the option. I know there was kind of some time crunches in either direction. If you wanted to make an exit now before I bring up the panel, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
I'll hang around.
Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and...
I'll stick around for a few minutes more. I am starting to fade. My cold medicine's wearing off. But could I turn my camera off so I could...
Yes,
be a little
absolutely. Do your thing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet our panel.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear everybody. You just have to wait because the music is going and the video intro is going. So we got you up here now, though. All right, so here's how I like to play. Usually the first in the door gets to ask the first question, and we'll move around the room. Let's try to be mindful. Ask your question, get your answer, and then hold tight. We can follow up with further discussion later, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity to talk. Hi, 10th man. All right, first in line backstage was Near. Near, I want to go ahead and hand it off to you. If you had a question or comment to add, go for it.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. I just want to say Mark did a really good job in asking questions. But I do want to say I do believe that subjective morality fails because it cannot condemn atrocities, right? Because it cannot condemn atrocities wrongfully, only as a disapprove. So my question to him is, if morality is subjective, on what basis were Nazis objectively wrong? Were they wrong because of our standards today, or because we disapprove, or because of cultures? And then I will say, if the Nazi had won the war and rewritten the history, would genocide have become morally right? And if the answer is no, then morality cannot be dependent on who wins, or on the consensus, or on the belief. So morality, therefore, must be objective. My second comment is to the objective ethics. I do think that he failed to explain objective morality, or at least ground the objective morality. I know that he did try to explain it, but I do think that he didn't explain why. Just because, he keeps saying the self-defeating thing. So just because I believe that stealing is wrong and I steal it, it is going against my value. Acting against my value explains why I am inconsistent with my own values. It does not explain why my action is objectively wrong, which I think Mark was trying to point to him multiple times. And then I think that my question to him is, do you think that there's a difference between reason and ought? And if so, how do you define reason and how do you define ought? And that's it from my side.
Okay, well, first off, sort of condemning atrocities, right? So it goes against my moral fiber. It's offensive to me morally, but not everybody shares my morality, and these things have been morally acceptable in multiple civilizations. Again, I think you're sort of leaning into an argument from consequence. You're sort of saying, well, if you can't condemn atrocities objectively, then what basis did you condemn them from? Then you've got no objective way to condemn them. But that's not a reason why something is objective or subjective, right? There's no reason why that should be the case. You're basically saying, I don't like it if I can't condemn something objectively. Okay, but that doesn't make it objective. So what I'm talking about is what is, not what you want it to be. So if I sort of say, hey, I find that reprehensible, my society finds it reprehensible, we're basically saying, hey, it's immoral to us. In another society, it may be moral, but I would disagree with them. And I also can say, if their goal is to make their society stronger, what they're doing is immoral by their own standard as well, because it will not make their society stronger. Sort of what they did is definitely didn't make their society stronger. Now, you said if the Nazis had won, it would have been moral. Well, it would have been moral for them. I mean, if I was a survivor of the war, it still wouldn't have been moral for me. But that's the whole point about subjectivity. And just because I sort of will disagree with them on what is moral, it doesn't mean that it has to be objective, because I don't have some sort of objective ground to stand on.
But then I would argue that no one in the past then was morally wrong in the past either, because including Nazi Germany, because you're just differentiating what your view is from them. And so the result is basically just unacceptable. Okay.
Yeah, it's unacceptable by my standards, unacceptable by a lot of people's standards. It depends on what those people want, though. If they want a flourishing world, sort of a fascist regime will not give that to you. There is no path to get to a flourishing, happy world through that. So if that's what you want, that may be moral to you. But at that point, we have to say, well, I'm not going to be part of that society because that's not what I want.
Okay, perfect. It looks like objective ethics camera or something jumped, like clicked out. So I can't pull him back up until it connects back in. He may have to jump out and back in. Yeah, you have to do that on your end, OE. You have to like do something on your end. It's not going to let me. It probably jump out and back in might be the best thing. Deconverted man, we'll move on until OE gets back. But deconverted, do you have a question for Mark or OE?
Yeah, well, I wanted to see if we could get both of them to post their syllogism and shatter the description of the video. I don't know if Mark had one per se, but yeah, I just want to make sure that they could do that, or somebody could. And then for Mark, I had a couple of questions, but one I think you kind of already answered using the chess analogy, that you could call morals objective because they point to the ethical goal.
Yep.
But the ethics itself is subjective ultimately.
Well, the meta-ethics is.
Yeah. And then, then the other question was, if morals are subjective, but then lying about them being objective would increase human well-being or better conditions for life or whatever, then would it be moral to lie about morals being objective?
No, I don't think so. I don't think sort of if we look at the long-term ramifications of lying or misrepresenting the actuality of our reality around us, it's never led to good things. Like it's never like if I believe that, hey, morals are subjective, but I'm sitting here going, no, morals are objective because something I know is wrong, sort of misrepresenting the truth generally. So what we're talking about is reasonable outcomes based upon what we know about the outcomes, and misrepresenting reality has never really led to good outcomes. So it's probably not a good idea.
Okay. All right. Okay. The other questions I had were for OE, but
he is back now. So
he's
OE,
back.
OE, are you with us?
I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing around here. Yeah, I think. Can you guys at least hear me now? Okay.
Yep.
I tried to cut my camera and it just gave me one button, camera mic, and that was it. It kicked me out.
Oh, interesting.
You're on. You're on. We all hear you.
I thought I was the one that didn't know what I was doing. No.
That's okay. Converted.
Did you want me to answer the reason versus ought from Near before I don't know. I didn't hear what the next question was. I know he asked if I think there's a difference between reason and ought, and that's when I dipped out. I do also really quick, let me just say hello to Duck, Deconverted Man, Near. It's so great to see you guys. I interact with you guys on my channel or other channels, and it's really, really nice to see so many friendly faces. As far as reason,
can I just say too? It's
absolutely
amazing to see the OE PFP that I always see on Gnosis's channel, on Dr. D's channel. It's so good to see you here too. Like,
I appreciate you so much. Yeah,
Dex,
Dex, you always have such great insight. And if you ever do want to come speak on one of my open panels, I'd like to personally extend you an invitation. I find you to be very intelligent, and you have a lot to offer a conversation, a lot of insight. So we do a live stream every Sunday.
I find myself intelligent too. And yeah, if you guys are doing open panels on Sunday,
I love Sarah's twitch to her eyes when you said that.
This could be an email, gentlemen. Deconverted, I wanted to hand it back to you.
Okay. OE, what was, or do you know the name of the ethical system that you think is objective?
There's 3 objective ethical systems. There's actually multiple. I had these notes. I don't know if I could pull this up. Oh, fuck. I don't think I have this written. There's natural law theory would be one of them. I think Aquinas talked about natural law theory. There's the argument from reason, which would be from Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. There's the ontological argument or cosmological argument. What was that from Carrier? I think that's the ontological argument. There's Ayn Rand's argument from reason, from objectivism. There's did I cover? I think I mentioned, at least touched on each one of those throughout the debate.
Yeah, I think so. And then are the morals subjective, but then the ethics are objective, or vis-a-vis?
So in every one of those moral systems, morality and ethics are synonymous. I don't think they separate one from the other. I used to actually separate them, but I just found as I was reading in philosophy, I haven't really found, and I'm fairly ignorant, so there might be stuff out there I'm just unaware of. but I haven't found a lot of philosophical models that are separating ethics and morality. I think that a conversation could be had about that, because I think we do have like business ethics or ethics in medicine, for example, so on and so forth.
Okay. And then I left it in the private chat asking if you could put the syllogism in your description. And I don't know if Mark had one, but anyway, so that's it for me. Okay. Thanks, guys. And girls and robots and everything else.
Actually, I think we share a friend, Dave from Captive Desk. So it's good to meet you.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to be a contrarian. It was bad to see you, but then I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. But then I said it, but I didn't really say it, so it doesn't count. There's a lobster. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
And I want to take a moment to acknowledge fourth. Oops, I got the wrong thingy clicked. Fourth Wiseman coming in with the big 50 over on, I believe it's Balderson's side. Correct me if I'm wrong. I love it when they send love over your way. And as a kind reminder, if you are here on this panel, you are welcome to dual stream. There's a button in the top right corner that says stream this to your audience. We are sharing is caring policy here. So please feel free to do so, and we can bring up your super chats as well. So Balderson, I want to go ahead and hand it over to you. After I just let everyone know, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the gauntlet here momentarily, so be prepared for that. Ben, to you.
This is literally just a misunderstanding of logic. And logic is getting to the heart of what something is. When something is objective, it's factual. So like people want to take in things like murder or something like that. Just the fact that you called it murder already makes this a subjective thing for you. Somebody died, that's a fact. Now from that fact, you're going to decide, is it murder? Was it justified? There's a whole list of things, and you're going to decide on that list of things, whether it's good, bad, blah, blah. All that is subjective. The objective thing was somebody got killed. That's the only objective thing. Toasty and I were arguing in the chat. Hot and cold is the perfect example. My wife, her version of it's too hot and my version of it's too hot are different entirely, because there's no objective it's hot. There's no temperature. When you walk outside and look at your thermometer, there's nothing that says, oh, 82 is hot, 81 is not. It's not. It's a subjective thing. And so trying to overlay subjective onto objective, the only purpose for that is to justify, and this is what Near was doing, trying to justify your actions by making them something that can't be questioned. And this is honestly how we enter the Dark Ages, where you decide that the only thing that you think is what counts. Because the fact is the Nazis didn't think they were evil. That tells you it's not objective. Otherwise, the Nazis would have went, yep, we're evil, but we like it.
Well, I think it definitely can be argued that if you say it is a objective fact that somebody was killed in contravention of the laws of a society, I think that is perhaps an objective fact, or you can make an argument that it's an objective fact. But I get where you're coming from.
It's against the law, but that's not morality.
Well, no, I'm not saying it is, but we're simply but we're not talking about morality. We're talking about objective versus subjective. We're not talking about morality. Right. So it can be argued that, and yeah, I kind of agree, but I'm not sure sort of why it has to be in the Dark Ages. If people have sort of moral compatibility, if people agree that we shouldn't treat each other badly or do these things, I'm not sure why that would lead to the Dark Ages. Like I said, I don't really care where it comes from.
But Mark, he's making a point that immorality is just what you just said, just moral to us. Then Nazis were moral to them. Genocide was right to their culture, and we can only say we dislike what they did, but we want to say more than that. We want to say that they were wrong, even if they believed otherwise.
That's why you've made objective, subjective into objective, to try and justify your reasoning.
Right. So that's the point that he's
subjective into objective at all. That's not my position.
No, his position is subjective. He's saying that he just explained his position that we can as a society, we can decide what is moral to us. That's what Mark just mentioned. And then I'm saying that then that means that morality depends on the culture, time, or perspective. And there is no fact of the matter beyond the group attitudes. So I think that is moral relativism in that case. So if morality is only relative, then moral progress is an illusion.
Slightly different here. I think my position's slightly different because I think we can decide sort of intersubjectively between the in people in a society what the meta-ethical goal is, and then it's objective and objective in virtue of that goal. Okay, so it's slightly different. You're not sort of, I'm a meta-ethical relativist. So yeah, I think that in past times, people have chosen different goals subjectively, like to, have the Aztec gods to be the one that got the most sacrifices, or for the glory of this particular king in this area. They have chosen different goals, but I think that once you get down to it, you can say, hey, their goal was to make their kingdom prosper and they failed miserably. They did not take actions in order to get them to this determination. So even by their own standard, I can say that that's immoral because the actions taken do not match the goal that is after, because the probable outcome or the reasonable outcome of those actions will not lead them to their stated goal.
Okay. Ben, do you feel satisfied?
No.
Or did you have a follow-up?
I'm not sure why a stated goal has anything to do with morality. Why a cultural goal? He just entirely made that up. That the culture has some stated goal that is unified. Like, I've never been in a unified culture, and I've been around for a while. I believe we're in the United States and we're one culture, but damn if we don't every fucking night sit on these panels arguing over. Just recently, is it okay for that cop to have blasted that lady in the face? Was it okay for her to take and drive and do the things that she did? And it's on and on and on, because there isn't an objective morality at all.
Do you think okay, well, I'm not getting into specific. Do you think that is a common goal for Americans to advance the prosperity of America?
No, I don't.
No. Okay.
No.
Do you think most
Mark,
Americans
I think
would
that's
disagree?
Hold on, Near. I do want to let it just be between them so we can move around the room. And we will go into full open discussion after everybody gets their time.
Do you think that most Americans would want their country to prosper?
I don't think most Americans think of the country in that type of way at all. I don't think we're a particularly nationalistic. In fact, half the country is anti-nationalistic, give or take.
Okay.
And that's quite a popular stance at this point.
So most Americans are
I'm
anti-American.
I'm not sure how we can have an objective goal at that point.
I never said it was objective.
You did, though.
No, I didn't.
You said you went on about how the nation itself, the people of the nation, can have
Balderson, I clearly said that goal is intersubjective. It's basically decided on by a whole load of people going, hey, this is what we want for our country. This is we want the country to flourish. Now, you may not agree with that, sure, but I would be prepared to bet that most Americans are pro-America. Okay, I would be prepared to bet that.
Most doesn't reach objective. Most is still.
Am I stuttering? Am I stuttering here?
Mark, hold on. Mark is
the other guy. I'm not even sure why you picked up arguing with me. It's fucking hilarious.
I think, Sarah, we can move on. He made his point.
Who are you? Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't recall anyone else hosting this show and telling me what to fucking do on my own show. Duck, you were next in line, sir. I'd like to hand it to you.
All right. So Mark, thank you so much for giving us the debate and everything. You and OE were cool. I forgot because OE's still here too. I'd just like to get you guys to weigh in. I have an argument, and if this sparks some debate between us, cool.
Cool.
But I have what some might consider a core text here for some subjectivist. It's called The Bonobo and the Atheist. This is a very well-known book, very well-researched book by a biologist guy named Franz de Waal. And so basically, this makes the case that primates evolve, stuff that us and monkeys talk about. It's stuff, but I also think that this is limited to biology. I also think this argument, the Bonobo and the Atheist, the biological argument for subjective morals, is limited to biology. It shows that science, it ultimately shows science can't actually produce a grounding for a moral theory. Or, you know, it's just a very limited moral theory. It's very limited in scope. So what do you guys think about that? If I'm a very scientific guy and I say science actually does, it doesn't support subjective morality, it does nothing. Am I right for doing that or something like that?
Objective Beth, did you want to talk? I've been talking a lot lately.
I'm trying to follow now. Maybe I'm getting a little loopy. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm fighting off this cold flu, but it sounded to me like, and I'm so sorry if I misheard, but did you say that science does support objective morality and then it does not at the same time?
No, I mean, okay. So Franz de Waal can spend 4 years writing this fucking book or whatever. He researches every day for 4 years is what he does. And he writes this Bonobo and the Atheist book. It's crazy good. But as good as it is, it's just about science. So all this evidence is just kind of this piece of shit empirical, sort of no analysis, not analytic. It's not really actually based on a worldview. It is within a worldview, but it's not based on that worldview. And so I'm saying that even core texts about subjective ethics support objective morality. That's all I'm saying.
I think that because I did try to substantiate a lot of my arguments in nature. And I do think that it's something that we evolved to have the capacity for morality. Now, I'm not sure how relative that is to exactly what you're saying. I know Mark attacked that point by with the fallacy appeal to nature, I think is, if I'm remembering that correctly, Mark.
Yeah.
So is that kind of where you're talking about? Because I do think that we have evolved to understand, to be able to attain a certain moral sense, because we have the ability, and I don't know if the monkeys do in this book because I haven't read it, but is this based on a certain ability for, God, would I say introspection at that point? Because Mark knows a lot more about evolution than I do, but monkeys are highly evolved compared to like
what's an ape?
Zebras or what the fuck ever, right? So
bonobos especially. But that's kind of the point, is that we can evolve to the year 10,000, right? And we can look back at our early ancestors and we can still ask the moral question, is like, are the first humans that traveled together and stuff like this, and they migrated together, they maybe hunted together and they did that kind of stuff. Were they moral, right? Were those and so it's not actually about whether or not in this case, it's not about whether there's a scientific theory or if it's in nature. I don't know. That's just what I would debate you. I would say we don't actually find objective morality. It's an analytic it's more of an analytic philosophical sort of argument.
I sort of think that I think that empathy and reciprocity have evolved, and we can see that. My favorite is the capuchin monkeys. They've done a number of tests on them to see how much empathy they have and how much reciprocity, how much fairness plays in. And there's a hilarious one of a monkey absolutely losing their crap because they were treated unfairly by a researcher. They absolutely get mad. But if that is the standard for morality, there's a problem there, because morality is a code of conduct. Right. So the question becomes, and I've debated this before, is do animals have morality? And I would actually argue no. I think they do have empathy for one another. That's definitely been proven. Or social animals, I should say. They do have reciprocity for one another, a sense of fairness, as we displayed in the monkeys and the bonobos, by the way. But it doesn't rise to the level of a code of conduct. Now, I think it's sort of a proto-morality. There are things that you can do in capuchin monkey society that will get you thrown out.
Yeah, good point.
That, like, if a monkey steals, for instance, they will get thrown out of the troop and maybe beaten up. But whether it raises to a code of conduct that governs that society, that's really what I would argue in that case. So the same is true for the evolutionary product of empathy and reciprocity, that yeah, we feel empathy for other people, and I think that facilitates morality, but it does not in and of itself rise to morality.
Can I jump in there, Mark?
Sure, go for it.
Can I jump in there? So the one thing I would want to say is that, okay, so, you know, it's a really strong argument, but I do disagree. And here's why. Okay. Here's why is because we could still ask a question like with capuchin monkeys or bonobos or bonobos or humans, like we could isolate a situation where it's like, well, if you have a trusted partner who you cohabitate with, right? And so not just any partner, but it's someone you know, should you commit violence against that person, right? And so maybe this isn't the same moral question we'd ask about humans, but there's got to be something, you know, this isn't like a 6-7 situation, right? There's something more, there's something in common in nature in those two scenarios that seems to actually carry over in our judgments and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
Like I think to me that seems to lean towards, well, yeah, objectivity. It's not necessarily like found in nature in some sense, but it seems to be a product of empirical findings in the way we categorize or somehow, you know, explain or create laws for those truths, you know, whatever those things are.
Well, I think that, you know, sort of an important thing to remember is alongside sort of empathy and reciprocity, we do also have anger, violence, tribalism, all of these things which we consider bad as well. So the question then becomes, we have a whole load of natural drives and natural sort of, you know, senses like empathy and reciprocity, but we also have jealousy, aggression, things like that. So which one do we listen to? And I think that, to me, morality is saying, well, which one we listen to is the one that will get you to the reasonable, probable outcome that you are looking for. Right. So if you are bailed up by a wall and you want to survive, then maybe fight that aggression thing is the best way to go. Right. Like under that circumstance, for that outcome, that may be the best way to go. But in other cases, like sort of, you know, keeping a society flourishing and fulfilled, that might not be the best way to go.
Right.
And then there's also the problem of who you assign those senses to, like the sense of empathy. What you'll find is the in-group or the acceptable group within a society will have that empathy displayed towards them, while the out-group, the outsider, will not. So there's also the subjective, if you do take empathy and reciprocity as sort of a given natural moral fact, there's also the problem of, well, why is it subjective who those feelings are designated towards?
Yeah, it's a little too psychological for my liking. Like, and it's just funny, you know, maybe it is a discomfort thing. I don't mean, like, I know that sounds accusatory, but from my perspective, it's like, well, you know, I generally try to remove, I think like over really long time horizons, we try to remove the, you know, these sort of subjective motivations and things like this. To ultimately land back into like a group, right? A supervening a state of what nature is like, right? A state of affairs, we might say in discussion, but like actually a supervening group of what is actually in the universe. And so to me, you know, this one of the reasons why I tend to think they still have some quality that makes them objective in nature at the end of it. Isn't because the motivations and things like our motivations are totally irrelevant. It's just ultimately we would, you know, to me, maybe it's tautology, but we're trying to find the same sort of, you know, whatever, the same sort of like metaphysical and epistemic rigor that we wouldn't doing anything else.
Yes.
You know, and so it's just, you know, it's not like
think it's
overnight...
a mistake to do that? Yeah. Do you think it's a mistake to try to get that epistemic justification?
It doesn't seem like it's a mistake to pursue it. I don't know if that's a fair question back to you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it's a mistake to pursue it. I think that sort of asking for the rigor that we have with, say, scientific endeavors where everything is objective as humanly possible, I think that may be, from my perspective as being a meta-ethical relativist, like a lost cause, because we're trying to ground the morality in something that, to my mind, it probably doesn't exist. And like I said, I won't die on that hill. If someone can show it, fantastic. But, I don't think it exists. So I think that, hey, pursue it with rigor, but I think be prepared that you won't find something that will hold up under scientific scrutiny.
I mean, I'm basically satisfied. I would just say with that, it's like, well, I don't think this is a lone wolf pursuit, and ultimately the sort of final thing that in my view, not in my infinite wisdom or greatness or anything like that, but I would say that kind of the what I think of as the alpha arguments for objective morality, the things you might reach first versus in this case, like the beta arguments are good things and whatever comes after are also good. But the alpha arguments for objective morality are like, what was it? Okay, so I'd have a hankering to understand morality around chemistry. And so that is worth pursuing, even if it's incoherent. Biochemistry and morality. And then fundamental physics and morality. It maybe is a total sort of crapshoot, but it's absolutely is 100% worth doing.
Well, I don't think chemistry, like when you're talking about chemists, you really have ethics rather than morality, because it's sort of an external application from society in general. I don't think you have an internal morality coming up in the chemist. It's more ethical behavior, like, ethical business practice and ethical this. I think that it is an externally applied thing.
All right, let me, Duck, hold your thoughts for the open part, and then we'll go from there. 10th man, I want to hand it to you, if you had anything to add in.
Yeah, I'm still stuck up on when Buddy said things were half empty and half full, but like you can't have something that's half empty unless you emptied half of it out, and the thing's empty unless you half fill it. So it's hard for me to listen to somebody and take them seriously when they say things like these things like, "Ooh, if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a noise?" No, because nothing can hear it, and it's only vibrations in the atmosphere until it's heard. Otherwise, it's not sound. And obviously,
Well, it depends what you're defining as
became
sound.
from the no. Obviously, the egg came before the chicken, because the thing that laid the egg wasn't the chicken. These are very basic things that anybody with a tiny bit of intelligence should be able to understand, but you people use these things as justifications for things that can't be justified, and then try to make it sound like you're smart, but they're very easy to answer, right?
Like
so
what?
The things you guys are talking about is nothing is true and everything's permitted, and all of your objective and subjective things, just like another thing I just saw there a minute ago about how feminism is a subject of luxury, the same as your conversations. When it's The Walking Dead and the zombies are out, and you guys are having these conversations.
Could you just put the volume down just a little? You're very loud, according to the people.
Yeah, I'll get it on my end.
I don't think I am, actually.
I got him.
No.
Where's your question, 10th? If not, we can hand it over, and then you can hold off until the open
Does
session.
either one of you actually believe that anything is true?
Yes.
Is objectivity real, or is it a figment of your imagination?
Is objectivity real? Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think that it is objective. I do
Prove
agree
it.
that we only have access to the world from a subjective lens, right? Everything has to essentially be filtered through our own
Prove
sense.
it materially.
Well, empiricism proves it. When you say proof, like if you're going for hard solipsism or something, then I reject that, because whether I believe it or not, you don't need an overarching sort of, prove it, absolute proof kind of thing. What we have is a lot of evidence and a lot of reasons to believe that things are objectively true. And then there's things that, but truth is, when people say truth, it may be
Subjective.
true. No.
It is.
Because if I say, okay, it's summer, right? That is objectively true for me, but it may not be objectively true for you.
And I think that experiential asymmetry is another way that we have access to the external world. Like I don't deduce that I'm in pain. I experience that I'm in pain. But when I touch my hand on the burner, right? But when Mark is at my house and he touches the burner and I look at him and I observe that, I don't experience Mark's pain, but I can deduce Mark's reactions being the same as mine were when I touched the burner. And so that I get exactly use deduction to validate my own experiences. So because of that asymmetry from deduction and experience, that validates my own experiences as well. So I see there's an objective world around me.
All right. I want to move on to Robin. You had a question, I assume, if you want to go ahead and chime in.
Well, thank you. I just want to tell Mark
Robin.
and OE, yeah, y'all did great. Yeah, that's great. I did have that, what I said about the, I was just wondering about the
Determinism.
Yeah, I can't spell. That's why that occurred to me while y'all were talking about whether that would change not necessarily the objectivity of it, but the subjectivity of it. Like it wouldn't like flip from one to the other, but I thought it would make it less subjective if it was actually something that was determined. But I want to, yeah.
So are you talking about hard determinism, like no free will, or are you just talking about like in physics, things are deterministic, like causal events chain?
No, like if we're hard, like if you were to subscribe to like Robert Sapolsky's hard determinism,
yes,
then would that make everything less subjective because it wouldn't really be stance dependent as much as it would be dependent upon your biological.
It would be objective, but then it's sort of like, well, I mean, how would you then define morality? How would you say what you ought to do is something when you have no choice to do that thing? Like somebody may, go out of the shop taking something, and you, as a hard determinist, you might say, hey, it's their background, it's their genetics, it's all of these things, and they had absolutely no choice but to walk out of the store with something in their purse or something under their arm. And you might go, well, what's moral then? You ought not to have gone out of the store with that thing. Does that even make sense if somebody has no choice to do that thing? Maybe.
Well, I mean, I think like we have to have laws because we have to deal with each other, and I think that the morality part would be less important on how we like come to deal with that person. Like, I mean, like what would be how we deal with someone who did not follow that.
Laws are subjective, and generally they follow a intersubject or the society's sort of ethics or morals. So people, obviously legislators make laws. People can contribute to the legislators, or they elect them, or they get into power somehow, and then they create laws upon that. So laws and morals are definitely different things. Laws are prescriptive, morals aren't. They're simply what you ought to and ought not to do. So, but it's sort of, we're sort of saying now that, hey, morality is sort of whether somebody obeys the laws or not. So what gave us those laws in the first place, if not morality?
Well, I mean, I didn't really say it was morality as far as just like how we treat the person.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah, Robin, I'm picking up what you're putting down. And I think that's, and I don't have an extensive knowledge of Robert Sapolsky, but I have looked into some of his stuff. Actually, I find him to be really brilliant and really enjoy his stuff. But even with his position of hard determinism, Robert Sapolsky, because the environment plays a part in our actions, our quote unquote decision making. But even Robert Sapolsky believes that we have a certain element of decision-making process or functionality. And so when it comes to how we treat, now, not the laws, what Mark's talking about, that's subjective. I agree with that. But what you're talking about, if I'm understanding you, is when somebody violates the law, how do we ethically treat this person? Because if things are determined, can we really condemn criminal behavior, so on and so forth? And Robert Sapolsky, from my understanding, is that we should be focusing on rehabilitation and education. which is where our criminal system fails, frankly, especially here in the U.S. I think it's 60% of people will reoffend within 3 years, 90% will reoffend within 10 years. It's because we're not rehabilitating people, we're locking them up. We're basically making them better criminals, frankly.
Yeah,
if anybody's been in the joint before, you just learn all the tricks of the trade. You meet new contacts and you're back on the streets doing, just another criminal again. So we really need to focus, according to Sapolsky, and I agree with him 100%, is that we focus on the rehabilitation of criminals, education. We do have to separate them from society. It isn't like we just say, oh, well, everything's determined. Too bad they just, drowned a bunch of babies or whatever. No, we definitely need to separate bad people, bad actors from society because they are an inherent danger. But we should be focusing our dollars and our efforts into rehabilitating and educating these people so they understand why did I make these decisions? Because the environment that they were in led to their decision-making process, so on and so forth. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And let me just say one more thing, and then I'm gonna get out of here. Like Mark, to me, the purpose of government, I kind of subscribe to what OE was talking about natural law theory, but more on a John Locke level for politics. So I believe that gut laws should be just the laws we have should be just to protect our rights from the government and from other people of violating those rights. So
I agree.
I don't think that laws should be based in moral opinions or anything like that. So that's why I think it would that would work. Because I am a hard determinist.
Okay.
So,
well, I think that with how you treat criminals after they've offended, I think it's the moral thing to do with rehabilitative justice, because that will get you to less crime. That is the shown and empirically demonstrated way to have less criminals. So if you are in fact after less criminals, then rehabilitative justice is the way to go. So I see it as moral because you have a ethical goal. One system where you try to rehabilitate somebody into society will get you to that goal, and the other one where you just lock them up to punish them with other criminals to learn from, that will not get you to the goal of less crime. We know from studies that sort of threatening people with punishment does not really prevent them from committing crimes. It isn't the thing that you would think does it. So
I'm completely on board with all that. On that kind of, I'm pretty much Robert Sapolsky. But and I just want to say one more thing. Duck, please say bonobo. It kills me when he says, I don't know how he says it.
Bonobo. Hey, it's my friend Mock looks like a bonobo. My friend Mock looks like he looks like a monkey, Robin. He's a chimpanzee these days, Robin. Maki's not a human.
But
Fair enough.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Robin. No problem here. Thank you so much for joining. Fourth Wiseman comes with the Big Ten. Good debate and discussions. No radical bantering towards understandings and success. All mountains are moved. One grain of sand at a time. I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Fourth Wiseman. It has been a really solid discussion, and I'm really excited for it to continue. Clay, you were next in line, sir. Did you have a thought or question to add in?
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It was absolutely an amazing debate, very respectful and all of that good stuff. And before I go into it, Sarah, I do want to apologize that yesterday I was absolutely being an asshole, and Jason absolutely was in the right to boot me. And I will try to do better. But to address the guys, so
it's not an apology without a yodel, Clay.
Oh no, that is reserved
for yodel for the gauntlet. We'll do that over there. Go ahead with your question, Clay.
So I wanted to address probably the hardest one for me, because I could go subjective or objective on this, but because I believe that people have what's called subjective morality, but that we are trying to attain an objective morality. Each and every one of us are. Now, that would be my main question. Why is it, if there is not objective morality, do human beings try, even with society, to obtain that objective morality if it doesn't exist? Why would we go that far? Why would we create laws? Why would we create words? And even if we are the ones who actually created them, maybe those words are just something that came up in our mind. Why is it that we have a conscience? Why is it that we have these meta realities in our minds being created that seem to point to an axiom of morality?
Well, I think it's mostly because we're sort of pattern seeking and recognizing beings. We seek patterns, and we have a problem with the misplaced concrete, right? That's something that's abstract that we think is concrete. So we have a tendency, a bias towards thinking things are concrete when they're really abstractions. So that, and a bias towards having an answer if no answer is there. We have a bias to say, hey, could it be this? And then inserting that as perhaps fact when we haven't established that as true. So we've got to be aware of our biases there. Why that is, probably something to do with the way that humans have developed over the years. If you don't know the answer to something, somebody with a concrete answer generally may take an action, whereas somebody without one, like for instance, the bushes rustle and you don't know what it is, it's generally the guy that thinks it's a tiger that survives, would be my answer. So things like pareidolia, we've got the tendency to see faces where none exist. That is a demonstrated tendency. And why that is, there's a lot of complex reasons why, but a lot of it is seeing agency or seeing somebody where there is no somebody, because it's good for survival. But, you know, whether that answers your question or not, I'm not sure. We may not know why we sort of think of things as concrete when they're abstracts. I'm not 100% sure.
No, that's a fair answer. And obviously, you know, you much like myself or anybody would most likely be operating on limited knowledge, right? You can only address what you do know versus, you know, if there's something out there that you don't know, then clearly you're not going to be able to speak on that with good knowledge. But that's where I say, you know, the possibility of objective morality is still there, of course.
Sure.
So it being the case that objective morality would be a possibility, wouldn't it seem even more so to be real, especially considering all of the meta that is possible?
Is it possible that objective morality isn't there?
Sure.
Okay, so you've got one option saying it's possible that it is there, and another option saying it's possible it's not. What rational justification would you have to go for either?
Well, of course, the meta. So the conscience, the virtues, so you personally believe things are good, that would be subjective, or bad, that would be subjective.
Right.
Others believe the same. Now, it may differ on what those good and bad are, but we are all trying to achieve that higher goal of morality. What would be that higher goal of morality if not objective?
Well, I would have to, you know, a higher goal, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but sort of as far as conscience is concerned, a lot of the higher level officers of the Nazis, they thought they were doing the right thing. They didn't have the conscience that you're speaking of. Like they were basically like, yeah, I did it for my country. So if the conscience is something that is objective, why is it not the same for different people?
So the goal would be the same. The goal would still be objective morality.
What do you mean?
So it would still be that so essentially every person actually believes that what they are doing is a good thing, correct?
Well, Kai, I'm a bit confused because you're sort of putting intentionality into ontology, like the goal is for there to be objective morality. And it's like whatever intention it is to find objective morality or to find objective truths in the universe doesn't make it true or false, right? So if we think that, hey, light has a certain thing along a certain spectrum, just because we're trying to find that out doesn't mean it is true. That is independent of what we're trying to find.
Correct.
Like
no, that's
the
correct.
buffery sign over his brain going right now.
No,
yeah.
I'm really glad, Clay, that you brought this up, because there's something I'd not made an argument for, and I never actually considered it previously. I thought it was a dichotomy, either or, objective or subjective. But I've been talking to some people. In fact, I think Deconverted Man, who has left now, he's one of the people who got me thinking this. Maybe it's Chris. Oh, it was you, Bionic. I can't remember who I was talking to recently, but it has been proposed to me that maybe there's a little bit of both in play. And this might be a place where we have to then separate ethics and morality to figure out which is which. Again, I don't have an argument for that, but you kind of got me thinking about if we can transition from one, or the end goal is to this objective standard. I wonder if it leaves room for the argument that maybe there is room for both. Like some moral claims are subjective and they are actually moral claims, and there is an objective standard to a certain number, or maybe even a limited number of objective claims. I mean, it's very interesting to think about. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think.
Hey, Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm totally interrupting. I got to take off, actually. Mike's burrito made me too hungry. So I'll see you guys later. Take care.
Bye, Doc. Have a good night.
Burrito strike.
Objective ethics. I apologize for the rude interruption for Doc, but if you still had a final thought to that, I didn't know if you were finished.
No, that's pretty much it. I appreciate the kind words about the debate as well. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. No, and I'll finish up with this. So, yeah, that's actually what I believe. I actually do believe that there is a higher standard of morality, which, I don't even like to call it morality personally. I believe, that that's just a made up word so that, essentially religious figures can establish what is good and bad, but we're talking specifically about what is good and bad here. So, objectively, I do believe that there is a final goal of good, and then there objectively is a bad, right? So this is why we have words like red rum. This is why we have words like essay and assault itself, and these things are objectively words that mean bad things. This thing that happened is a bad thing, and I understand that some people don't believe that, but we don't call those people sane. We actually call them idiots before the court.
Are we talking more about emotivism then, or non-cognitivism, or?
Yeah, I guess because essentially that's, the ability to determine what is good and bad, right? So some people just simply don't have that.
And I'm assuming that this is based on an emotional reaction. What drives us emotionally, or are we still looking at something empirical or rational?
Yeah, because essentially, feelings, right? And this is where I also believe that a lot of religious figures have been kind of steering people in the wrong direction. Like logic is a great tool, but so are feelings. We are composed of both, and as human beings, we should consider both. So when we are looking at the world around us and what others want or don't want, and society at large should or ought, these things come into play. So our feelings are very important. And, I get it, we're men, we don't need those feelings. But at the same time, the reality is that this is how we operate in the world, in the natural world.
All right. Jason also sends in the Big 10 to you, Clay, and says you were forgiven beforehand, but thank you for the apology. And I thank you as well. I thank you as well. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Bionic if you want to ask a question or make a comment.
Hey guys, what's going on? So I kind of want to just kind of reach out to objective because I think I'm one person that I believe, the devil's in the definitions. And as he was laying out his arguments, I just felt like he was trying to build an argument for objective morality with language and concepts that were just wholly subjective. So I was wondering if maybe in a bumper sticker way, you can kind of make some of those arguments without using loaded words like fulfillment and good and thriving and success. And you know what I mean? Simply because I feel like you need to, in order to get to that objective place, you're using highly subjective uh, words. And that's the place where I kept banging my head trying to understand how you get there while relying on things that I think are completely open to interpretation. And I can think of 1,000 examples where that's not always the case. Like I'll just give you an example. Like when you talked about, you know, how maybe a central goal is for our own survival or our own thriving, and you compared it to some biological drive. We think of the stories of the guy who jumped on the grenade, or the parent who skipped a meal to give to their kids and stuff. So again, I just, for me, I feel like if you can think of a reasonable exception to that rule or exception to that premise, then you have to go back to the drawing board and explain the exception instead of just relying on the, well, we all know that's what it is. So I wanted to give you that opportunity to do that.
No, I think that's a fair criticism, and I do think, well, there's two. I tried to, probably fairly ineffectively, just, you know, to be frank, I don't think I did the best job. I've tried to basically form three different arguments to show that objective morality could be, the conclusion could be reached three different ways. One of them was through the reason, right? So agency, and I ran a very long syllogism. I won't run you guys through that again because it was very long. I had a much shorter one about logic, right? The law of non-contradiction, focused on that. So that's not subjective. And the first one was through evolution. And I don't think that's subjective either, because, you know, jumping on the grenade, we did have conversation in the debate. Mark did press me on, you know, the well-being argument, but the first three formal arguments, I don't think any one of those was based on a subjective standard, unless, yeah, I don't know. I think Deconverted Man wanted me to post that syllogism in the comments. I think what I'll do is tomorrow I have Dr. Dan Norton, who's a Ayn Rand specialist who believes in Ayn Rand believes in objectivism. I brought Ayn Rand up in this conversation. She's a moral realist or a moral objectivist. So we'll be discussing this again tomorrow. So if you want to tune into the show tomorrow, I think I'll lay out, maybe we'll get into that because we are going to be discussing ethics on that show. I know, Mark, I don't know if you're busy. I would love to have you stop by. I don't know what you do on Sunday afternoons, but at any time you're always invited. So Chris, would it be okay to address that tomorrow afternoon?
Sure. But I guess I'm just make my little mini point here is I'm also, maybe in a conversation we can have at a later time, you're going to have to help me bridge the gap or bridge the analogy between a moral argument, which I think is very much humanistic, and it's a human concept. I don't think there is morality outside of the human cognition to create those analogies to biological drives and functions like hunger or the need for oxygen and stuff, because I don't think those are compatible or analogous concepts. To say that in the same way we need to eat, we also need to be moral. I don't think that's, and I'm not saying that's the argument you're making, but if I could oversimplify, I feel like you're kind of playing with that concept as if you can treat those things as if they're parallel drives in our human experience, right?
Oh, I think that's a fair criticism. Can I ask, because I'm not sure, maybe you're not even touching on this, but I think it might have been brought up earlier. So if something's relative, that doesn't necessarily mean it's subjective, right? It's just relative to a particular context or point of discussion. Are we on the same page with that?
I mean, I think relative in a certain context means as it relates to that subject, right? So
yeah, but it's not necessarily
stance,
right? But it's not stance dependent, right? So like the laws of evolution for birds are relative to flying animals with feathers, but it's not subjective because the laws of evolution are objective, right? So if something's relative, that doesn't inherently mean it's subjective. Are we on the same page with that? Or would you say that's not true?
I don't know, maybe I have a head cold because I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I'd say there's sort of laws of evolution. I mean, there's laws of nature, but evolution doesn't really prioritize one thing over another, as in, you know, a law sense, like you would have laws of physics kind of thing. Like this is how things will go. Evolution is more whatever works. It doesn't have a intentionality or a goal in mind. It's just whatever works.
Well, I defer to you when it comes to anything about evolution, but just for my own clarity, Mark. So I agree with you that evolution doesn't have intentionality, but you mentioned the laws of physics, but the laws of physics don't have intentionality either, right? I mean, they are brute facts. They're natural processes.
Can you give us an example of a law of evolution?
Well, I wouldn't say evolution is brute fact. No.
All right.
No, I would say that like your direct sensory input may be a brute fact, but I wouldn't say evolution is. That's not a brute fact.
Again, this is why I say I feel like the devil's in definitions.
Is it a physical? Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Is it? No, I'm glad we're having this because this will help me with my own clarification with language or use of language. So when it comes to, because I would equivocate, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I would equivocate evolution to be a natural process, and I would equivocate the laws of physics to be a natural process. So to me, however, whatever language I should use, are they on two different spectrums? Evolution, because what drives evolution is ultimately a natural process. You have hereditary traits.
I think, okay, so from my understanding, and I'll allow kind of someone who knows better. From what I understand, I just think when we talk about evolution, we're talking about a process, and we're talking about it's an ad hoc explanation of a series of processes. And then if you ask a biochemist, they can explain evolution through the biochemistry. If you ask an ecologist, a biologist, you know what I mean? I just think when we talk about evolution, it's a catch-all term, but depending on what scope and what angle you want to take, it can have different conversations, including physics, right? If you want to talk about the biophysics of how genes and proteins and all that stuff, right? So again, this is where it gets, it's like it's rustling the tar baby, because I do think that if we're going to have the conversation, we need to agree on the level and the scope in which we're looking at a thing. Because if you want to talk about the laws of evolution, if you will, the only laws I can kind of think is possibly proliferation of the species. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't it come down to like you have environmental pressures, hereditary traits, and mutations? Isn't that basically what evolution is restricted to, Mark? Or Chris? I know Mark knows a lot about evolution. Did I miss anything? I've got those 3 points. Right? You got the hereditary traits, you've got environmental pressure, and you've got mutations.
Oh, there's a ton of them. There's also horizontal gene transfer. There's endogenous retroviruses. There's a ton of mechanisms within it. But what I'm sort of trying to get across is that, like, evolution doesn't go, well, we ought to make this species a social species, right? Oh, it doesn't decide that or have an intentionality towards that. That is one of the paths it could have taken. And there's like all these different evolutionary paths that we have that we see in different animals that are all successful. And they're successful because they're still here.
I agree with you. I agree with this, that it's not, there's no intention. I do agree with you there, and which is where I put it on the same level with like the laws of physics. There's no intention to the laws of physics. The Earth doesn't rotate around the sun because you and I are on the same page. We don't believe in a creator of some kind with intention or will. So it's just the laws of physics determine that the Earth rotates around the sun. There's no actual intention there. Same thing I would equivocate with evolution.
By the way, I'm just to kind of make it something tangible.
No, I'm glad you brought it up, Chris, because the language is important, and I agree with you 100%. It's important for me to be more clear, or to learn to be more clear about the way I articulate these things. So I appreciate you bringing this up, and it's an opportunity for me to have Mark's. I do respect Mark's knowledge in regards to particular to evolution, so I can ask him these questions, directly.
But I'll also say, like, just to kind of bring it back to what we've been speaking about, which is morality, and not to sound like Agent Smith, but the morality. I think the morality of human beings is not that different than the morality of the bacteria, where it's proliferation, right? So as much as we have a morality amongst ourselves, a lot of times that morality is based on us versus not us, right? A lot of times it's based on who we see as human. Like, you brought up the concept of slavery. To say that, human beings deserve rights, I can agree to that and say, yeah, but Black people aren't human beings. Right? That's a side step to that argument. You know what I mean? So I think the human rationale, I think rationality is a blessing and a curse because it makes us brilliant people, but also allows us to rationalize horrendous things and do it with a smirk on our face and say, oh no, it's not genocide, it's conquest, right? It's self-defense. And and I, they always say bringing up the Nazis, going back to the Nazi argument, half of those very moral people, they were doing it from what their perception of was a self-defense. Because once they allowed that kind of the idea that they were fighting against vermin, or that they were fighting against an injustice, or they were fighting against an invasion, then it made it so much easier to say that then we're doing this for blood and soil. So those atrocities that we can now retroactively look at as atrocities, or those atrocities that we as a collective amongst us look as atrocities, to them, they're saying, well, of course you're going to see them as atrocities because we're defending ourselves and you don't think we have a right to. So again, the rationality that a lot of people can have makes it so easy for us to turn what are very subjective concepts into knock on it hard objective rules. And that's where I think there's a disconnect for me. Help me. You know what I mean?
All right. I would like to let everyone know the gauntlet is officially open. If you know where you're going, please feel free to start heading over now. That is at the gauntlet debate. Otherwise, I've dropped the link in the chat, and we will also set up the raid. That's all set to go. So I'm closing out on the Raging Tomato on YouTube side now. And feel free, if you want to continue the show, to move over to the gauntlet. That also means I'm also opening the floor. Michael and Scott, I know you guys didn't have direct one-on-one time, but we can't do it all night or else it'll get really, really boring. So the floor is officially open for anybody to kind of jump in on anything, but I will hand the floor over to Michael if he would like to kick us off with his thought, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I might take off because the burritos made me hungry as well, and it's lunchtime
I know, I'm
here.
starving.
So everyone blame
I want to talk about Save the Cat, though. I want to talk about Save the Cat. Give me 1 minute.
All right, quickly. Yep, go for it.
Okay, Save the Cat as a screenwriting book dropped when I was studying screenwriting, and I was a real fan of Robert McKee's screenwriting book called Story. Are you familiar with that book?
No, I'm not.
It was like the Save the Cat before Save the Cat came out, basically.
Okay.
It was the dominant book before Save the Cat took over the screenwriting.
Oh, look,
people,
Michael,
right?
I don't have a great knowledge of screenwriting. It's just my wife
No
is
worries.
a writer, and I'm aware of the
Yeah.
all I did was piece it up with the general overall attitude of people towards cats in our society. That's all.
Cool. Oh, right on. Well, I'll just ask this quick question.
Sure.
Which was by that other author, and he kind of was hugely influential 3 degrees away from movies because he was training all the screenwriters who wrote the movies in the 90s and 2000s, right? I liked his book, but he had this really cool idea about what evil was. And I want to know what you think about his idea of evil, which is a book he was working on 15 years ago and never finished, but it's one of the coolest philosophical ideas I've ever heard. So I want to hear what you think. His definition of evil was any idea taken to its logical conclusion is evil. So you can have a belief of any kind, but as soon as you go out there with it, then you're the problem.
Well,
but as long as you're chill with your belief, it's like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm oversimplifying, but that was the idea.
Yeah. No, I get what it's saying, but I would sort of think to an extreme would be evil, like when the action is outweighing where you need to get to, basically. So if you want to get to people being happy, and you decide that the way to do that is to drug them all or something, that's sort of an example that we go down. But I think from my point of view, evil's obviously got to be married into immorality, right? To morality, what we ought to do and ought not to do. But I would assign intentionality to evil. So if you accidentally drop a hammer on someone's foot, that's not evil, right? You accidentally did it. It may be immoral. You ought not to drop things on people's feet, but I wouldn't say it's evil. I think it's when the intentionality is to cause immoral things to happen. So if I, if you grab a hammer and hit somebody on, that would be evil. So I think there has to be the intentionality to do so. But I'm not sure that, so a logical conclusion, if you go, well, if a logical conclusion to making everybody happy with no focus on how you do it, like, so the ends justify the means, then yeah, absolutely, that always turns into an absolute nightmare, because how we do it is actually important. But I think that if you're sort of saying, hey, the logical outcome of trying to do anything is evil, I don't think I would agree with that. I think that I would use the word reasonable. I think I would use the word reasonable. So a reasonable outcome of, you know, feeding people who are poor in our society is less starving people and a more healthy society. You know, I think that's a reasonable outcome. So I wouldn't agree with that definition. But I think it would be evil to intentionally inflict that upon somebody. And because my morality is based on human well-being, I think that I've chosen that because I care for human well-being. It is a subjective thing that I've chosen, but I think objectively we can say that if I sort of, you know, intend to do that, yeah, that's downright evil. Yeah, absolutely.
Michael, do you mind if I chime in on that? I know you.
Yeah,
didn't
I'm going to take off.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really enjoyed it. Do take care, and I will head out. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, sorry, peeps. I'm gonna close up. I am. Look, you probably don't see it. I don't sweat on my head a lot. It might be a bit more shiny than usual. I am hot as fuck in this room. I'm not even joking. Like it is a damn sauna in here. It is a damn sauna in here. Oh yeah, cool. No worries, McTime. Look, I'm happy for people to chat in the chat and have disagreements. Like I said, I wouldn't die on this subjective morality here. It would be nice. I would prefer it if there was objective morals, right? Like that's what I would prefer. But I don't credit to reality what I prefer. I credit to reality what I have evidence of and what I can reasonably induce and deduce from the information I have around me. So that's sort of why I kept going to an appeal to consequence, because an objection is often, well, people can do stuff and you can't objectively say right or wrong. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's automatically objective. That's the consequence of subjective morality. Right. But the problem is that even if I can't say that's objectively immoral, I can still say that is immoral by my evaluation. And that is enough. And morality is important, I think, more important because it isn't objective. It's because we have to make a world in which we can live. And, you know, drawing away from what is the thing that makes people happy and what makes people well is a horrible world that nobody wants to live in. But, you know, yeah. It's over on Raging Tomato. I couldn't fit it in the title, but there should be a link to Raging Tomatoes in the description, mate, if you do want to get in. It's over on somebody else's channel. I'm just a visitor. I'm just an aimless hobo meandering through the internet, having discussions and arguing with people. Look, Objective Ethics, he's a great guy. Met him a few times before. We did a over on Ember's channel, Better Than Ember. We did he did a debate that we reviewed, and it was a great, you know, I've talked to him before. Really love the guy. He's a stand-up guy, fantastic guy. Just, you know, we have this disagreement, but there's no reason we can't talk about it like adults. It's yeah. To makeup person. Look, if I wear makeup in this room, I will be dripping it into my eyes. I won't be able to see my notes. It'll be a disaster all round. It's not going to, like, seriously. Love you all, but maybe not. Maybe not, because it's baying in here. But yeah, thank you all so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. Share if you thought it was a great discussion. I had fun. I had a lot of fun. I will be putting timestamps in, but I really do need to get some lunch first, and there's a couple of things I need to do. But don't forget, be kind to yourself, okay? Be kind to yourself. Look, we're just discussing things here. No one's being nasty. No one's being horrible. If we disagree, that's cool. You know, I'm not the arbiter of what is and isn't. Have your own opinion. We can disagree. I still think you're cool. I still think you're cool. If even you disagree with me, that's all right. It's okay. It doesn't collapse anything. We'll be okay. But be kind to others. If they disagree with you, don't crucify them. It's okay. Yeah, if they're actively harming people, that might be a problem. But if you just, like, most people agree on morals just out in the wash. They might have different opinions. They might have different, you know, places they're coming from. It's fine. It's when people start to harm others. That's when we should, like, really jump on it. But thank you so much, everybody. This has been a blast. I got to do more of these. I promise I will try as hard as possible to do more of these, because this was fantastic. Take care, everybody. and I will see you in the next one.